Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Steve Bloom. I'm the CEO of the Portland Japanese Garden. It's my pleasure to welcome here this afternoon. I'd like to welcome Governor Brown. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward, thank you for being here. So it's really a great honor and pleasure to be embarking on this, what is the first collaboration partnership with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation out of Washington, D.C. for the Japan Institute and the Portland Japanese Garden. As many of you know, the garden has been around for nearly 60 years. However, this year is the inaugural launch of our Japan Institute, which will be a platform for the kinds of conversations that we're going to have here today. And so it's truly an honor to have you all and to welcome you here and to embark on this newly found relationship with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I want to just talk a little bit about the Japan Institute and our organization, and to kind of set the stage before we begin here. And then I'll ask for the Sasakawa people to come up and say a few words. This garden was founded in 1963 of humble beginnings. It was a group of leaders from Oregon and Portland, Oregon, and a group of leaders from Sapporo, Japan, who thought it would be a lovely idea to build this garden to be able to come to a better mutual understanding after World War II, when there were still a lot of hard feelings between our communities following the war. And an amazing thing has come, and we're going to talk about the U.S.-Japan relationship. And in particular today, we're going to talk about the power of this place at the intersection of culture, art, and nature, and the power that brings to the dialogue and the relationship between our two countries. And one would think that, well, it's art and it's culture that doesn't have much to do with anything, but in fact it does. And great things can happen at this intersection, and we're going to talk about that intersection today. What kind of great things can happen? Well, we are living proof. We are a successful case study for this kind of organization in bringing along the U.S.-Japan relation, and then being able to go out as a voice for our shared values with Japan to communities around the world, from the lessons that we've learned over the last 60 years from this relationship that we've built here. So these humble beginnings that saw a $250,000 construction budget at that time. In the first year, some 28,000 people came to the garden, and they were really excited about that. And by 2005, when I arrived at the garden, in fact, there were about 100,000 visitors a year coming to the garden. And the garden had grown into what is considered the most authentic Japanese garden in the world outside of Japan. And that's pretty remarkable. Even Japanese, when they come, it's hard to convince Japanese to go to see a Japanese garden somewhere outside of Japan, right? Talk about a busman's holiday. But when they walk in this place, it's universal in terms of their incredible, they're struck with what they see here, and at the commitment of this community towards this relationship. And I think that's pretty remarkable. So the power of this garden is such that it's not just a place where people come, and yes, it is. It brings, our mission is inspiring harmony and peace, and that can manifest itself in different ways, both internally for peace, but also externally between nations and between peoples. And so everything from environmental sustainability to economic development, cultural and creative enterprise, and actual peacemaking happen here and start here from this garden, to the point where this little garden that welcomed 28,000 people is now welcoming over 500,000 people a year. And this little garden that went on 2005, when I arrived, I was employee number 17, now employs 140 people. And this little garden that was just here was invested in by this community and Japan to double its size in 2017 with a $37 million investment of private donations to make this place bigger, and so that we could do more. And currently we're in the midst of a $30 million capital campaign, and we've just purchased a new campus for the Japan Institute just 3 miles from here. And we're anticipating that by the end of 2024, moving into that campus, we will be doing close to 400 culture, art, and education programs per year, with 500,000 visitors, with over 200 full-time staff, doing programs on 6 continents around the world. That is the power of this intersection of culture, art, and nature. So don't let anyone ever tell you that we don't matter, because we do as much as anyone else does. I believe that there's one thing that every living being on this planet has in common, and that is a connection to nature. I don't care where you live, where you were born, who your parents are. You have, from the beginning of your life, had a connection to nature. And when we start with that as a premise for a conversation, then we can talk about anything and we can accomplish anything. So that's why we're here today, and it's really an honor to welcome you all. We have a distinguished group of people here in the audience to participate, to speak, and to listen, and to hear, and then to go and spread the word. Because if you leave here today and you don't spread the word, then you have failed the rest of the community, because you are the chosen ones to hear this today. So it was just before the pandemic that I got to meet with Akimoto-san from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, president of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation in Washington, D.C., and with Shanti Shoji, who is the director of programs, who's here with us today. And we sat over dinner and we talked about the possibility of doing something like this. While I believe the Sasakawa Foundation has done a great deal of focus on economic development and on the politics and diplomacy of the U.S.-Japan relationship, I believe this is the first, or one of the first programs where they too are now beginning to focus on and realizing the value of this intersection of culture, art, and nature. And so we're honored that they've chosen us as a vehicle for that conversation. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the podium, on behalf of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Shanti Shoji.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. My name is Shanti Shoji, Director of Programs at Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, or that's a mouthful, so Sasakawa USA we say for short. We're just so honored to be partnering with the Japan Institute of the Portland Japanese Garden, here with Steve and his team to be able to hold this event today. And also, as mentioned, we have very distinguished guests with us. I'd like to say thank you to Governor Kate Brown for spending some time with us. I know you're so busy. Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward, and also Consul General Masaki Shiga from the Consul General of Japan. Along with Dr. Satohiro Akimoto, Chairman and President of Sasakawa USA, who regrets he could not be here with us today, I want to thank you for taking your time to join us. We're very lucky that we get to be here on a Tuesday when the garden is closed to the public. It's very quiet. You can hear all the birds. So thank you so much for allowing us to use this beautiful location. To provide you some context for today's event, I'd like to share a little bit about Sasakawa USA and this TAWA, or the Alliance Working in America, series that we have. So Sasakawa USA, based in Washington, D.C., is dedicated to deepening the understanding of and strengthening ties between the U.S. and Japan. We mainly focus on, as he kind of mentioned, kind of hard security, diplomacy issues, doing that through exchanges, publications, networking, and programs. But we also do grassroots outreach type of events, and we're excited to be able to go into nature, a connection to nature and culture today. So this Alliance Working in America series was launched in 2017 at Sasakawa USA. And, we really realized that we do a lot of programming in DC for all the policymakers, but the Alliance is very important around the United States. So we travel to different locations throughout the U.S. To talk about the Alliance and its impact on that local community, and very excited for the discussions we'll have today about that. So as for this specific program for TAWA, this is a very special event for me. I'm actually a Portland native. I've been in DC for 15 years, but I have benefited from the close ties that Oregon has with Japan. So I studied Japanese at Clackamas High School for 4 years. I was very lucky. And then I went on to study at the University of Oregon. I bleed green and yellow, go Ducks. I know there's beavers in here too. But it's just really an honor to be able to come back home from my post in DC and put this program on with the Portland Japanese Garden. All right, so we look forward to hearing from our panelists about Portland and Oregon-based initiatives to address the major challenges we face today, which include climate change, resource scarcity, and preserving free trade and investment in an increasingly complex international geopolitical landscape. While these issues contain nuances unique to local communities, the same basic challenges are shared by our partners and allies abroad. In this regard, there is a great potential for the United States and its close ally, Japan, to collaborate in our shared pursuit of a more peaceful, stable, and prosperous society for all. To conclude, I'd like to again thank Steve Bloom, Aki Nakanishi, and his wonderful team here at the Portland Japanese Garden for their incredible efforts for today's program. As Steve mentioned, this has been a long time in the making. I think the first email was sent in June of 2020 to begin, and this is our third time that we thought we could do it due to COVID. So we have made it, and thank you everyone for being here. I'd also like to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today, including our virtual keynote speaker, Ms. Katherine Monahan, Director for East Asia National Security Council. She was formerly the Japan Desk Director at Department of State, and due to this unexpected move to the NSC, she sadly couldn't be with us in person today, but shares a virtual message we'll have. And lastly, thank you to everyone in attendance again for being with us today. I hope you'll really enjoy listening to these panelists and having some new thoughts and maybe ideas about ways we can continue to collaborate in nature and cultural connections. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next person I'm introducing needs no introduction. I think this is a woman that I have incredible admiration for. There has been no tougher job in the country than being a governor of a state in the last 2 years. These extraordinary leaders were put into no-win situations of day-to-day, minute-by-minute crisis management where countless lives were at risk. Of course, there's criticism, and of course we could have done better, and different decisions could have made, and we're all, we're all able to judge that after the fact. But to be in it and to lead our state and to save the lives that were saved, I have great admiration for our governor, and it gives me great honor to bring her to the podium, Governor Kate Brown.
Thank you so much, Steve, for your very kind comments, and good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly my pleasure to join you for the first of what I'm sure will be many excellent forums put on by the newly established Japan Institute. I want to say thank you to the Japanese Garden and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA for hosting this particular event. Both of these organizations do incredible work. Thank you both. In Oregon, we have a long-standing relationship with Japan and certainly appreciate our cultural, educational, and economic ties. I am very pleased that we had a member of the Oregon legislature join us, Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward. Thank you so much. And I'm grateful that we are going to be joined by Consul General Shiga of the Portland Consular Office of Japan. Thank you for your continued partnership and friendship. On a side note, having nothing to do with the environment, with peace, or with art, we're in the midst of hosting the World Athletics Championships at the University of Oregon. We were tickled to see Japan win both the gold and the silver in the men's 20,000 kilometer race walk. And we also know that Tokyo is in line to host the games in 2025, and we all look forward to visiting Tokyo for that event. So, as I mentioned at the outset, we're just so proud of our close economic, cultural, and educational ties with Japan. Oregon and the prefecture of Toyama have enjoyed a very vibrant and incredibly enriching sister state relationship since 1991. We look forward to welcoming Toyama Governor Nida very soon, And today we are so pleased to have Risa Murakami with us from the International Affairs Division of the Toyama Prefectural Government. So welcome. And Oregon enjoys 27 sister city relationships with cities across Japan, the largest one being between Portland and the city of Sapporo, formed in 1959, before I was born. This is one of the oldest sister city relationships in the entire United States of America. And Oregon also has really enjoyed our trading relationship with the nation of Japan. Over 30% of all goods and services produced in Oregon go to Japan, worth approximately $2 billion, with wheat accounting for the largest share of that number. And with rapid advancement in emerging technologies, the Oregon-Japan relationship is shaping up to be even stronger and more robust. The high-tech industry is propelling further growth in business across the Pacific, bringing jobs to Oregon and spurring economic opportunities, as well as spurring more opportunities for cultural exchange. Just as rich as the economic bonds we share, our cultural bonds are also very important. Oregon is the proud home, of course, to a very vibrant Japanese American community. Cultural jewels such as this beautiful garden, thank you, Steve, for your extraordinary leadership, and the incredible Japanese art exhibit space at the Portland Art Museum. We also share some very common values for some of the most critical issues we are facing today: environmental sustainability, food security, energy, and of course, global peace. These shared values and goals set an incredible foundation for our discussion today on how we can continue to work together in today's very fast changing world. So I am very much looking forward to hearing from today's speakers about the ways in which peoples from both of our countries, and of course the state of Oregon, can further develop our relationships to create shared prosperity and ensure peace for all. So thank you all so much for joining us. I look forward to today's program.
Thank you, Governor. I would be remiss if I didn't just say a few words about the recent assassination of Prime Minister Abe. We all watched in horror as the events unfolded recently. To watch that happen, and for me, having known the Abes, and in particular Akie-san, Mrs. Abe, who was a supporter of the garden here, and to watch that happen, you realize the importance of the work that we're doing, that there is no excuse for violent means to express yourself. And that is part of peacemaking, is understanding that dialogue is always more important than violence in peacemaking. And on a couple of occasions, I worked to get Prime Minister and Mrs. Abe to come to the garden, and of course, world events always got in the way. And Portland isn't exactly on the way to New York or London, but we got very close in 2017 for the grand opening of our beautiful cultural crossing village here. And when they finally weren't able to come, I had lunch with Akie-san, and she said, "We can't come, but can we donate all of the sake for the grand opening gala?" And I said, "You absolutely can." And so they were here in spirit, and you can feel their presence, and many in Japan who have all contributed in their way to the work that we do. And so it was a sad day last week. But what I do know is that Prime Minister Abe did his best. He was a great advocate for the U.S.-Japan relationship, and we owe him a debt of gratitude. So thank you, Prime Minister. With that, our relationship to the Japanese government going back to the very beginning has been a very critical one, and we have always had the wonderful support, and we've had the wonderful opportunity to have a consular office here in Portland. Not every city has one, and the fact that we have 3 close by, it's really a testament to the importance of the relationship between Oregon and Japan, that Japan has kept this it's open for so long. And so we have the great pleasure of having a wonderful Consul General, and I want to invite Consul General, Consul General Shiga to come up and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy that one of the outreach programs organized by Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA is held here in Portland in partnership with the Portland Japanese Garden. Today, the US-Japan alliance plays a pivotal role in maintaining stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. We support and are very much looking forward to this initiative to let citizens know the importance of the US-Japan relationship through discussions with leaders from each US state and region. This program aims to protect our interests and values through a stronger US-Japan relationship and to contribute to peace and prosperity in the region. I fully understand the importance of partnership and cooperation with Japan in the US global strategy, and I look forward to even greater cooperation. But I will leave it to our colleagues and friends in Washington, D.C. and Tokyo to talk about this. I would like to discuss from a local perspective the significance of one of the Alliance Working in America series being held here in Portland. There's a long history of exchange between Japan and Portland or Oregon. The Japanese immigrants who settled here in the late 19th century contributed to the development of the region through the construction of railroads and other infrastructure, forestry, and cultivation of their own farmland and orchards. Although there were times of hardship, many of those who are considered Nikkei have succeeded and are highly respected here for their hard work, loyalty to their new homeland, the United States, and for their significant contributions to civic and regional society. You can learn more about their journey at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. Today, they occupy an important position as one of the communities that can bridge the cultural gap between Japan and the United States. Along with Japan's economic development after World War II, economic relations with Oregon grew dramatically. Initially, trade in agricultural products such as lumber and wheat was the main focus, but later Japanese investment and corporate expansion in the high-tech manufacturing sector increased. Today, Japanese businesses are involved in a wide variety of fields, including semiconductors, food processing, outdoor and sporting goods, and real estate development. Will this history and track record of exchange be sustained, or will it fade with time, giving way to other emerging economies and regions? I would like to emphasize that here in Oregon, we have a steady stream of young people who are interested in Japan and Asia. We have an abundance of people who want to play an active role in the world, and we have tremendous potential for cooperation with Japan. Just to give you one example, the story of the Kasagi, a part of Shrine Gate, that was washed ashore from Japan on the Oregon coast after the 2011 tsunami, is still fresh in our minds. The Portland Japanese Garden did a wonderful job of locating the community where it originally came from, and with the help of many volunteers, it was returned to that Japanese village. But then what happened? Many things washed up on the shore at the time, and many people realized that we are neighbors across the Pacific Ocean. A person named Nate Sandu, who was the director of education at the Columbia River Maritime Museum in Astoria, was inspired by this and started a program to send mini boats between Japan and the Pacific Northwest region across the Pacific Ocean. This is a youth marine education program that originally released small unmanned GPS-equipped boats into the ocean to raise awareness about the ocean by observing how the boats drifted. It took a long time to return the Kasagi to its owner as it wasn't equipped with GPS. But these mini boats are able to check their current location daily. Students watch with great interest to see where the boats are going. In fact, one of the boats launched in water near Japan is now approaching the Oregon coast. So more than 1,500 students have participated to date, partnering with elementary and middle school students on the US side and the elementary school students in Hachinohe, Japan, which is where the Kasagi came from. The students themselves have built their own mini boats and have been able to communicate with each other online throughout the pandemic to showcase their work. One middle school student in Poland developed a special interest in Japan as a result of this program, and we have had a chance to welcome her in our office. So this is an amazing program because the students find friends on the other side of the ocean who are working on the same issues as they are. In doing so, the students experience firsthand the late President Kennedy's words: the Pacific Ocean doesn't separate Japan and the United States, rather it unites us. So this is just one example, but these young people are our treasures. And they have the ability to be at the center of our future society as they tackle a wide range of challenges. That is why we support education and all initiatives that positively impact their paths. I mentioned the close economic ties between Japan and Oregon, but our relationship cannot be measured in terms of money. We are trying to build a high-quality cooperative relationship based on the knowledge and trust we have accumulated through our past exchanges, where we can work together to solve the world's problems by leveraging our mutual strength. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss the important challenges we face and the creative ideas and initiatives that will lead to cooperation in a region with such a great potential. The issues we plan to address at this TAWA PDX are all very important and interesting. And I look forward to useful information and discussion from the perspectives of each of the experienced participants. I would like to thank the Portland Japanese Garden for providing a wonderful setting for this meeting and for the excellent planning. I believe that this is a substantial international exchange project that represents a new direction for the Portland Japanese Garden, which is about to take off with its ambitious Japan Institute project. My sincere thanks also go to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA and its staff for making TAWA possible in Poland, the speakers and panelists for their participation, and the state government, City of Poland, and all those who support this event. I wish you all a meaningful and thought-provoking exchange of ideas and a successful program. Thank you.
Thank you, Consul General. Next, Katherine Monahan, who's the director of East Asia National Security Council from the U.S. government. As I think as Shanti mentioned earlier, she, back in 2020, we all go back to 2020. Back in 2020, when we had our actually 2019, we had our pre-launch event for the Japan Institute at the Japanese ambassador's residence, welcoming about 250 members from Washington, D.C. and the East Coast U.S.-Japan relationship. And Katherine was there, and that was the first time I had a chance to meet her, and she was so excited about what we were doing. And we've kept her appraised of all of this, and of course, invited her to come out, and she got this promotion just at the wrong time for us. So she's not able to be here with us today, but she has sent a video message, and so we'd like to call your attention to the screen. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Kemi Monahan beaming in from Washington, D.C. It's such an honor to be invited to address this distinguished group as part of the Sasakawa Foundation's Alliance Working in America series. I wish I could be there with you in person in the world-famous, very beautiful Portland Japanese garden. Many thanks to my good friends and colleagues at Sasakawa, including Shanti and Dr. Akimoto. I cannot talk about U.S.-Japan relations right now without mentioning former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo and his tragic assassination in Nara last week. As I record this video, Secretary Blinken is in Tokyo paying his respects to the Japanese people and delivering a private letter from our president to Mrs. Abe. Abe-san coined the phrase free and open Indo-Pacific. He championed the U.S.-Japan alliance that has become so critical to the security of the region. He was a world leader as well as a Japanese leader. He will be missed. As many of you know, I have just taken on a new role as East Asia Director at the National Security Council at the White House, focusing on Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. As a career Foreign Service officer, my life is full of change, but I'm very excited about this latest one. I've been supporting the President and his communications regarding this tragedy. I'm glad I could be at the White House at this important time. Whether at the State Department or the National Security Council, our goals for the U.S.-Japan relationship remain the same: to work closely with our key ally and partner to ensure our joint prosperity and security, and beyond that, a free and open Indo-Pacific, as Mr. Abe so aptly said. There is no more critical alliance in this pivotal time in history than the U.S.-Japan alliance. And this alliance, this partnership, is fundamentally about people and common values. I'm very proud to be the lead on this alliance in our White House because it is a very, very special one and a very, very important one. I'll start today with an overview of the U.S.-Japan alliance and share some information about President Biden's recent trip to Japan. The U.S.-Japan alliance has served as the cornerstone for peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and across the world for 6 decades. As President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida affirmed in their May 23rd meeting in Tokyo, the U.S.-Japan partnership is stronger and deeper than any time in its history. Our leaders have also said, including in their virtual meeting in January, that the U.S.-Japan alliance has never been more important nor more necessary. Our complete alignment on so many issues and our shared view of a free and open Indo-Pacific is critical to President Biden's vision of more firmly anchoring the United States in the Indo-Pacific and in strengthening the Indo-Pacific region in the process. At the same time, as I'll discuss later, our partnership goes beyond the Indo-Pacific and is truly global. I'll put our priorities in 4 buckets that define what we call our North Stars. The first is to modernize the security alliance, and that was a very important goal of Prime Minister Abe and is a very important goal of Prime Minister Kishida. Our second North Star is partnering on global priorities. Those include things like standing together with Ukraine. Our third North Star is advancing the regional and global rules-based economic order, and I'll talk more about the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, as well as our economic 2+2 bilateral discussion. Finally, our fourth North Star, one that's very important to all of you here, is strengthening people-to-people ties. When he visited Japan in May, President Biden advanced these goals. On a personal level, President Biden shares a truly warm relationship with Prime Minister Kishida. You may have seen this on display in photos of the Prime Minister and his wife, Mrs. Kishida, hosting the president for a traditional tea ceremony in Tokyo, or perhaps when they greeted each other at the recent G7 and NATO meetings in Europe. Japan has a very special place in President Biden's heart. While this was before the president's first trip, this was not the president's first trip, because he did have a visit to Japan when he was vice president, and of course other times, but most recently when he was vice president, including during 2011, during the Great Japan earthquake. In Tokyo on May 23rd, President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida affirmed the partnership between our two nations, which is stronger and deeper than any other time in history. They affirmed the importance of the Indo-Pacific to global peace, security, and prosperity, and committed to respond to the increasingly challenging security environment. As global partners, they affirmed the importance of bolstering the rules-based economic order and countering threats to the free and open Indo-Pacific. Our leaders committed to deepen defense cooperation. President Biden strongly supported Prime Minister Kishida's determination to fundamentally reinforce Japan's defense capabilities, including through a substantial increase in Japan's defense budget. They discussed further cooperation to secure our shared prosperity, including the planned ministerial-level U.S.-Japan Economic Policy Consultative Committee, or the Economic 2+2, which we're calling EPIC, that will take place later this month. In the sciences, they were very excited about working together in so many fields, and they talked about most of them, including protecting and promoting critical technologies, space cooperation, cancer research, overcoming the COVID crisis and preventing future pandemics, climate change, nuclear energy collaboration, just to name a few of the topics. Both leaders are very focused on science, technology, and innovation topics, as are many of you here today. The U.S. private sector is leading global R&D on many of these critical areas for innovation and growth. For example, JBIC's recent $110 million investment in the Portland-based NewScale is a great example of innovation for the new world. The small modular reactor technology developed at Oregon State University will be revolutionary for clean energy. I know you all know that. It's really exciting. The local US-Japan business relationships will drive our future. And I know you also probably know that Japan is our largest foreign direct investor at over $600 billion annually in the United States. That's big. A few words about the EPIC, the new Economic Policy Consultative Committee. That's where we're discussing how to align our economies to address critical issues for the future of our economic prosperity. On January 21st of this year, President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida took a major step forward in announcing the EPIC to track and drive bilateral economic cooperation and, importantly, to strengthen the rules-based economic order in the Indo-Pacific region and the world. So taking back the economic order, the standards, the laws. Partnering with Japan at a high level on critical economic topics is pivotal to sustaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. Economic EPIC topics include collaboration on the digital economy, supply chain resilience, critical minerals, energy security, export controls, and countering economic coercion. To deliver the President's vision, the State Department and Commerce Department hosted the inaugural Vice Ministerial meeting of EPIC on May 6th. As I mentioned earlier, the first ministerial level meeting, including with Secretary Blinken, Foreign Minister Hayashi, Commerce Secretary Raimondo, and Minister of Medi Hagiuda, will take place later this month in late July. When President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida meet, they're always determined to see the US-Japan economic partnership of the first and third largest economies in the world address the most salient economic challenges of our time. EPIC and IPEF are key to that. They're talking about IPEF and returning to the President's visit. Apart from their bilateral meetings, the President and Prime Minister Kishida and other regional leaders joined together for the official launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, on May 23rd. Together, the 13 launch partners, actually it's now 14 with Fiji, represent about 40% of global GDP. The fact that such a range and significant number of economies joined the launch reflects the far-reaching ambition of the framework, indicating that there is a deep interest across the region in renewed US economic leadership. IPEF is a 21st century economic arrangement intended to tackle 21st century economic challenges, including setting the rules of the road for the digital economy, ensuring secure and resilient supply chains, helping make the kinds of major investments necessary in clean energy infrastructure and clean energy transition, and finally, raising standards for transparency, fair taxation, and anti-corruption. Finally, on May 24th, President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida, Indian Prime Minister Modi, and new Australian Prime Minister Albanese convened the Quad Leaders Summit to discuss progress on initiatives the four nations have been working on for quite some time, including COVID-19 vaccine assistance, economic recovery from the pandemic, the impact of climate change, humanitarian assistance, ensuring maritime security, securing critical and emerging technologies, counterterrorism, infrastructure coordination, and countering foreign disinformation, among others. The Quad is committed to bringing tangible benefits to people in the region. And I'll note that former Prime Minister Abe was the leader of Japan who initiated the Quad with the three other leaders. So that is also part of his legacy. Our multilateral engagement with Japan points to something else too, that Japan is much more than a regional partner. Today we acknowledge Japan's position as a truly global leader, working in lockstep with the United States. Since President Putin ordered the further invasion of Ukraine, Japan has stood with Ukraine, the US, and the world, implementing strong sanctions against Russia, providing assistance and welcoming those fleeing the Ukraine. Japan's strong and continuing actions against Russia since the first day of the invasion of Ukraine are clear evidence of its resolve to be a global leader and advocate for our shared values, even beyond the Indo-Pacific. As Prime Minister Kishida said early on, the invasion of Ukraine shakes the international order of Asia and the world. When Japan stepped in and Japan's courageous leadership, the world began to see Russia's war against Ukraine not as a European issue, but as a global mandate to defend the peace and sovereignty of free nations. We are proud to stand together with Japan. All of this unprecedented cooperation is possible thanks to the substantial reservoir of goodwill created by the close grassroots cultural and economic ties between the US and Japanese people, bolstered by events like this one and organizations like the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. There are more than 29,000 alumni of US government-supported exchange programs between the United States and Japan, creating lasting people-to-people ties. There are more than 30,000 American alumni of the Japanese government-sponsored Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, and I am one of those alumni, which was a great experience and really made me love Japan for my whole life. An amazing program. The Fulbright program in Japan has sent over 6,000 young Japanese on Fulbright scholarships to the United States since 1952. There are 37 US-based Japan America societies, many of which are sustained by close business ties between the US and Japan, like those here today at this meeting. The US and Japan share more sister city relationships with each other than any other country. I understand Portland is a sister city of Sapporo since 1959. That's a long time of sister cities. Ambassador Emmanuel is proud of the sister city relationship between Chicago and Osaka. The list goes on. Sustaining these economic and people-to-people ties is vital to the future of the US-Japan alliance. And we must continue to focus on engaging the next generation of Japanese and US leaders to instill unwavering support for and interest in the US-Japan relationship and the US-Japan alliance. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for this invitation to join you.
We're going to first move to our first panel now, which will be agriculture innovation in the U.S.-Japan trade in the age of climate disruption. When you look around at what's happening in the world today with climate change, and you think about the wildfires that we here in Oregon have gone through, I think it was in September of 2020, some 500,000 Oregon residents were displaced during that fire temporarily. So when you think about the decimation of the Amazon rainforest and what's happening to the climate as a result of that, and the displacement of not only peoples, but of animals that are so unique down there that we're losing to climate change. And when you think about both drought and fires that really jeopardize food security in the world, you realize what an important topic this is. Remember when I talked about that connection to nature? Well, there's a reason that the Nobel Peace Prize was given to the World Food Program in 2020. It was to draw attention to this very issue. It's very, very important, and we're going to talk about that here today as it pertains to the Oregon-Japan relationship. And looking for a moderator for this session, we needed to look no further than one of our own donors and members and supporters of the garden, Marianna Grossmann, who's the founder and managing partner of Minerva Ventures. And it's so great, the wealth of expertise that we have in the Portland Japanese garden family. So thank you, Marianna, and welcome, and please come on up.
So the first session of panelists today will be talking about agricultural innovation and trade in the age of climate disruption. One of the things that I found working with companies my company works with startups who are doing clean tech, the kinds of companies that Ron Pernick will be talking about, and we help them with business development and strategy and finding customers and partners to work with as they build their businesses. And we also work with established companies who are trying to address climate risk and think about what can they do to protect themselves, and also what are the opportunities for them to advance new products and services or to adjust their business processes to address the realities of climate change. And here it is, 90 degrees. Last year around this time we had the heat dome here in Portland, and around the world there are a lot of people suffering from heat. And I have a few slides to kind of set the context around that, and then we'll talk about the opportunities for innovation, and then Darren Padget and I will be talking about trade between Japan and the Pacific Northwest. Okay, so that's going to be our flow of the program. And I've introduced myself. I'm the moderator. And then we have Ron Pernick, who is the founder of and CEO of Clean Edge, which is a company that looks at all the clean tech innovations, especially in energy and battery storage, energy storage, smart grid, water, other sort of, and transportation, other things pertaining to clean energy, and also other new technologies that address climate change. And he'll be talking about some of the research that they do and the financial products that are developed as a result of his research. He's author of co-author of two books, The Clean Tech Nation and Clean Tech Revolution, and he's a deep expert based here in Portland. We're really lucky to have him here. And our other speaker today is Darren Padget, who is an Oregon wheat farmer. He's the fourth generation. His son is the fifth. And I understand there may be a new generation on the way. I don't want to jinx anything. And so he is going to speak from his deep expertise of growing wheat in a very challenging agricultural environment, doing dryland farming and shipping much of that wheat to customers around the world, especially in Japan. Okay, and also the other thing that distinguishes Darren is that he's been very active in a number of associations. He is a recent past chairman of U.S. Wheat Associates, which is a global wheat marketing and policy organization. He's done a lot of work with researchers at Oregon State University and other wheat-related associations. So he has a really global perspective. Okay, so if you've been paying attention, this chart is developed by Professor James Hansen, who was at NASA, is now at Columbia University. And this is one way of looking at the shift in global temperatures. So around 1950, things were kind of pretty normal, and then you start to see really exponential change year over year with a little bit, the blue squiggly line is kind of the variation. Some years it's wetter, some years it's drier, some years it's hotter or colder, but the overall trend is much more significant warming. And that is also illustrated in this chart that shows the average summer temperatures 10 years ago versus, or 20 years ago versus now. And you can see that there's a lot more heat, especially in the Southwest. And that is associated with more drought. So in this chart, you can see to the right that more than half of the U.S. is affected by drought, from abnormally dry conditions to exceptional drought. And the map on the left is from July 5th, that U.S. drought monitor that gives you a sense of how severe the drought is in certain areas. That helps you think about, on the left here where it says climate stability, under normal conditions in the past, climate was pretty much the same year to year, sometimes wetter, sometimes drier, and there were weather patterns that you would get used to, and some differences in seasonality. With climate disruption, as temperatures go up around the world, the soils get warmer, the ocean gets warmer. That leads to extreme weather events like droughts and fires and floods, and more unpredictability. So, for example, I think the Columbia River is at a 20-year high of water. There was a lot of rain and snow this year. There may be other years where there'll be less water. In certain areas like Salt Lake and Lake Mead and Lake Powell, they're at all-time low amounts of water in those lakes. So this kind of disruption leads to risks and also to opportunities and responsibilities. So there are rising costs associated with climate change as more crops get interrupted, the cost of food goes up, the cost of fuel going up. But on the opportunity side, there's platforms for innovation. And that, if you think about a phone, for example, that a smartphone is an example of a whole bunch of technologies coming together: miniaturization, batteries, semiconductors, screens that are touch screens. It has and computing in the cloud and easy programming. So you start to see changes in many industries, in travel and media and movies and the way people communicate in the phone industry. Many, many industries were disrupted by an innovation that was possible because of this convergence. So we call that a platform for innovation. And that's one of the things that Ron will be talking about in his talk, where multiple technologies come together that make things possible that were not possible before. And that's really an exciting part of this story. So, all right. I believe with that, yes, one more thing. So one thing, when you think about climate risks, one way of organizing them is into these three buckets. They're physical risks: heat stress, flooding, drought, wildfires, more severe wind, more energy in the storms, more giant hurricanes. Those come with physical risks. And then there are transition risks. So if business as usual is gone, then what's going to happen as regulation changes? What happens if there's a loss of subsidies as the government decides it wants to take on addressing climate change? Technology may become obsolete when there are these new platforms for innovation. And different liability standards may apply. And there may be stranded assets. For example, in the Silicon Valley, much of the real estate that is along the edge of the bay is very subject to flooding from sea level rise. And there's billions of dollars worth of those assets that may become unusable as the roads get flooded and as the parking lots and the buildings are affected by rising tides. And then there's economic and social risks. And we see famine already happening in some parts of the world. That leads to mass migration and conflict, market instability. And then capital ends up being spent on recovery instead of on innovation. And I think this is a really important area, especially for people with financial interests, that if you're kind of sucking that capital away from being investing in the new things by just having to rebuild the roads that have been on bridges that have been washed away by big storms or fighting fires or other kinds of recovery efforts. And then there's interruptions to supply chains, so there are costs of dealing with that and health impacts. There are many, many economic and social impacts. So I think it's helpful to kind of distinguish the different kinds of risks that climate change brings. And so I am stating an assumption that the climate system has been destabilized by human activity and burning fossil fuels. That creates new risks and challenges. It creates new opportunities for innovation. Sometimes change is hard because we're used to doing things a certain way. And then with platforms for innovation and convergence of technologies, there are very exciting new solutions that can leapfrog the way we've done things in the past. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron.
I know my slide's going to come right up here.
Your slides are next.
There we go. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. I want to thank the Portland Japanese Guard and Sasakawa, USA for pulling this together. And Steve said something about nature. And for me, all the work I've done in clean technology goes back to sort of a number of seminal moments in my life. And they're both nature-oriented. So the first was I spent my summers in Algonquin Park. How many people know Algonquin Park in Canada? Anyone? Okay. So it's about 3.5 hours north of Toronto. And when Neil Young sings about a town in northern Ontario, he's talking about Huntsville, which is very close to Tamaqua. And I spent my summers there, and I started at the age of 7, and I could drink, and you can question why my parents sent me to camp at 7, but I would drink the water straight out of the lake. And when I was about 9, they said, "You can't do that anymore, Ron. We can't drink the water because of acid rain." And I was a 9-year-old, and I'm like, "What do you mean I can't drink the water out of the lake? I've been doing it for 2 years." Had a huge impact. The other area is my involvement in Japan. I also am a student who got to study in Japan. I spent my junior year abroad at Konan Daigaku in Kobe. I went back afterwards, and from about 87 to 89, I worked in Japan. And I helped put on a conference called the Environment and Media Conference. So it was kind of overlapping communications and media and environmental issues. This is pre-Kyoto Protocol. But these seminal moments that happen in the exchanges and everything else, I just want to point out nature and exchanges. I'm really grateful to be here and to see the work that all of you are doing. So thank you for having us. So I'm going to take about 15 minutes. I'm going to be as fast as I can. That's a really quick overview for the data I'm going to share with you. It's not as much on food and ag. It's much more on energy and disruptions in global climate. So let me just
And Ron,
kind of,
you
yes.
have plenty of time. We started a little early.
Oh, good.
So no rushing.
So first of all, I want to say we're about halfway through the modern energy transition. I started my firm in 2000, and I would say that was really the beginning of the modern energy transition. There were a number of venture capitalists, there were a number of large corporates, there were a number of governments, including California, that were really starting to think about how are we going to transition from extracting fossil fuels to using clean energy. And if you fast forward 22 years, a lot of change has happened. So let me just tell you why. And I hope when we're done here, you'll walk away realizing that this transition is inevitable and this transition is happening more rapidly than a lot of people think, but there's still a lot of work to do. So we'll talk about that. So one is declining costs. This is the key driver. Today, and I'll show you some slides, solar and wind are now the most cost-competitive forms of new energy on the planet. You want to build a new electricity generation facility, you're not going to do many other things than solar and wind, and I'll walk you through that. The other thing is we're seeing investment shifts, more and more money. And if you look at the valuations, we have a really interesting slide that we pulled together showing the valuation of the clean energy leaders like Tesla and NextEra against big oil. And the market caps of the clean energy companies have now exceeded those of most of the big oil and natural gas companies. The other thing is public support. Whenever polling is done, about 70% plus people say they want to pursue a clean energy future and they want to see energy transition occur. So this is very important in terms of this has support in both the red side of the aisle and the blue side of the aisle in different countries and across many, almost all demographics. The other big trend we're seeing is smart grid and electrification trends. That's when you're seeing the electrification of vehicles, the electrification of heating through heat pumps. We're seeing electrification take over. And the value there is that clean electricity can be used instead of oil and gas. And then finally, low carbon policies. And right now, things look a bit dire. I think Manchin really, in the US in particular, took the initiative hostage and then, not in very good faith, basically blew it up last week. I think either this week or next week, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a number of executive orders coming from the federal government in the US. That said, you have to remember, California, just to our south, is the 5th largest economy in the world, and they have done nothing but forward clean energy. So it's not all lost, and I just wanted to walk you through that. So this is data that I will not spend a lot of time on. Almost everything I'm showing to you today, you can find on our website at cleanedge.com. You can go download reports and look at data that we put out. But this is one of the most important slides showing from 2009 to 2020, the decline in cost for solar and wind against other forms of energy. And this is a levelized cost of energy. So this is like, what does it cost all in, all of my expenses, my capital expenditures, and my fossil fuel or other costs? And what you'll see is that solar has declined over this period by about 90%. And in the same time frame, wind declined more than 70%. So this is the economic argument. We would not be seeing the clean energy transition if this hadn't occurred. But to back up, I worked first in telecom in Asia, then I worked in the internet, and now clean tech for 22 years. And it's always been about scaling and economies of scale. So that's what's exciting. Because if you think about oil and gas, they're extractive industries. If you think about clean tech, they're more like high tech. And so they have these abilities to see incredible. If you had talked to someone 9 years ago and showed them this cost reduction, most people wouldn't have believed this was possible. All the modeling from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs, and others were not this aggressive. At the same time, coal and nuclear have gone up. Now, we'll talk about nuclear. I know that NuScale was mentioned, and I do want to address that as well. So what do those lower costs mean? And this is just the US. But if you look over here in 2010, 75% plus of all net capacity additions, this is new electricity generating capacity brought online in the US, came from fossil fuels, right? So that's coal and natural gas. If you look at 2021, more than 3/4 of all capacity additions came from solar and wind. And if you look last year, 81% of all new capacity additions in the US came from renewables. And if you look globally, and you look at the IEA numbers and others, same number globally, 81%. So I just really want to put that in your heads, like, this is where things are going. It's hard sometimes to really understand that, but these are huge developments. And then this is sort of showing, this is kind of amazing because it just happened, crossed over in 2021. The installed capacity generation, globally from renewables surpassed that of nuclear. And that's not including hydro power. That's just solar and wind. So this is what we're dealing with. And it's really important to sort of think about how that's going to play out over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, especially if we're halfway point to the energy transition. So the other great enabler here, if you think about what's the issue with renewable energy? Can anyone tell me what would you say is probably the biggest issue? Storage. So storage and the intermittency, or it's not always on. The sun isn't shining, I don't have solar power, if the wind isn't blowing. And it's interesting that right now, just outside of here, Portland, Oregon, in Boardman, I don't know how many of you know about Boardman, there was a coal plant there. There's a solar wind storage plant just opened up. NextEra is involved. Portland General Electric is involved. It's the first plant like this in the US that's combining this. But in Australia, it exists. Outside the mainland, in places like Hawaii, it exists. This is where we're going to see utility scale. You talk about sort of mashups, the confluence of forces coming together. It's these three things you need to be thinking about. And that's the renewables, that's the storage, and that's feeding it into the grid to get it to large population centers. Now, what's going on? Over the last 10 years or so, we've seen an 89% decline in lithium-ion battery costs. So the next great enabler, and I think for US-Japan trade and innovation, cooperative engagement, definitely, and Panasonic, obviously, huge in energy storage. They're the ones who partnered with Tesla to make the Tesla vehicle possible. There's a company called Powin Energy just outside in Tualatin that's partnering with Mitsubishi to do grid scale storage. So a lot of opportunities, I think, between the US and Japan, in particularly around energy storage. So EVs, how many in this room own an EV? Can you raise your hand if you own an electric vehicle? So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4 out of, okay. So the US just reached a very interesting tipping point. 5% of all new sales of vehicles were electric vehicles. And Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, did some great analysis. And they looked at a range of countries. And what they saw is that once you hit the 5% number, game over. It's just transitioning, and it's going to go really fast. I own a hybrid car. My next vehicle will be an electric vehicle. There are issues with EVs. I live in Portland, and I have no garage. I have street parking. I need fast charging. Maybe the Hyundai Ioniq 5 will do that for me. But I need to charge in a half hour, not all night, because I don't have the luxury of a plug at my house. These are issues. But this is where we're at. And if you look here, Norway, I don't know if I have do I have a little pointer here? It doesn't matter. If you look at Norway, you can see how high they are right now. They're at 83.5% of all sales are electric vehicles right now. And you can see the year in which they got to 5%. It was 2013. They were really early advantage players here. They were early adopters. The U.S. is now joining this. So this is very interesting. You're not seeing Japan yet here, but I think, in time. The Japanese spent a lot of time focusing on fuel cells for cars. And that hasn't proven to be a good bet. So now they're pivoting. And you see that with Toyota and others. So interesting time to watch that. Let me just go to the next one. So I talked about energy storage. I now want to talk about the smart grid. And I don't know if you mentioned this in your introduction, but Clean Edge has done a lot of different things over the years. So we put on events, we did a lot of convening, we did consultative work with governments, nonprofits, for-profits. We wrote reports, we did custom analysis. But about 17 years ago, Clean Edge connected with NASDAQ. I had created a US-listed clean energy index. And I got a phone call from NASDAQ, and they said, hey, we keep reading about Clean Edge everywhere. Have you ever thought about creating a stock index? And I said, well, I've created one. And they said, well, would you like to partner? So NASDAQ and Clean Edge partnered. We now have 5 indexes together. We've got about $4.5 billion in assets under management in financial products tracking our published indexes in the Eurozone, North America, Israel. And one of the second indexes we did was a smart grid and grid infrastructure index. No other index like this exists right now. I don't know why. There's dozens of clean energy indexes. This is probably one of the most important things to enabling the future of energy. We need a 21st century grid that doesn't look like what Tesla and Edison would understand. And you mentioned the phone. Thank you for that. It's great. The phone changed everything. And if I took someone who developed the IBM mainframe and said, I've got so much more computational power in my hand than you did in that first mainframe, they wouldn't understand this. This would be hard. The fact that Edison and Tesla could look at today's grid and go, oh yeah, great, yeah, makes sense. That's not a lot of innovation. So innovation has to occur. So what does it look like? So first of all, we moved from just large power plants to distributed as well as large scale. We moved from a centralized spoke and wheel to a nodal environment, much more like the internet, where everything is connected. One thing goes down, it doesn't matter because it just reroutes. We've got, and I think this one, I'm not going to go through the whole slide here, but go to distribution real quick. You go from a one-way flow of electrons to a two-way flow. And that two-way flow of electrons is what enables a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here today. So again, I think from a Japan-US perspective, not only energy storage, but perhaps a bidirectional grid and energy storage and EVs are all opportunities. I want to just quickly walk, again, this is all on our website, so there's a lot of data here. I've got a team that's been working on indexing and tracking clean tech for decades. I think collectively we're at 70, 80 years. So we mapped out like which technologies are available right now and which ones are like 10 years out. And so if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the technologies. Like this is all makes sense, right? These are like, 100, 300 mile range electric vehicle. This is the LED. I guess I'll ask another question. How many people have LEDs in their home? I guess, will everyone raise their hand? How many people have basically all of their lighting coming from LEDs? It's a pretty good show. So this is the shift that's happened. These are available. They cost less than the prevailing technologies. In the middle, you're seeing things like green steel, green ammonia, green hydrogen. There's been a lot of discussion in those areas. And then quite frankly, getting out here to the 10 years plus, you're talking about scalable modular nuclear, and you're talking about all-electric long-haul air travel. Like those are so difficult to achieve. So just to point it out, use it as you'd like. Everyone has differences of opinion. This is our view of the world. But hopefully this is helpful. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback from other folks in the industry to sort of look at that. So how do you define the clean energy sector? If you look at our US-listed clean energy index, it's quite a bit different than a lot of the competitor indexes out there. And that's because we take a very holistic view. And so we include renewable energy. So that's solar, wind, geothermal. So all the stuff you'd expect. here are some of the companies. I think there's probably names a lot of people know here. NextEra, Clearway, some you don't. Then you have energy storage and conversion. And that's really where the battery technologies reside and where inverter technologies lie. We also put fuel cells in that arena, but really storing energy and converting it. And so you've got Enphase Energy. It's been an incredible company that has inverter technologies. Tesla is there for the electric vehicles. I don't know how many people know this, but Tesla also, of course, does home energy storage, but they're also now doing a lot of work with utility scale energy storage. So you have those companies. You have energy intelligence and smart grid, which are the other big bucket. And Itron from Seattle headquarters is there. And then, we also have a number of Japanese companies. Osaki is in there and quite a few others. The Japanese have been very involved in metering, which is why I said that bidirectionality opportunity with US, Japan, I think could be great because they have a lot of metering platform technologies in Japan. And the Japanese have been far more efficient than just about any other economy in the world. They just really focus on efficiency. And then finally, and this has been really a differentiator for us, where are all the materials going to come from to enable this? You've got to have the lithium supply. You've got to have the polysilicon supply, which, by the way, we have a great one right up at Moses Lake in Washington in the Pacific Northwest. So these are some of the areas of the buckets. And then on the grid side, I'll try to go really quick because, I know we want to get to Q&A. I hope you guys will ask questions because I'd love to engage on all of this. But you have grid infrastructure. This is the wiring, the transmission lines, the distribution grid. You've got the energy storage and conversion, which we talked about. Now you can see some of the Japanese companies here. You've got electric meters, devices, and networks. I think our next panel, we're going to have a smart home discussion. And then you've got enabling software. And again, area for both US and Japan and other regions. So I'm going to wrap up. We just published this today. We're thinking about all the challenges that we face right now and really thinking about, this isn't rocket science anymore. The technologies are available. I appreciate an all-of-the-above approach. I do. I get that, and Obama had an all-of-the-above energy approach. We really don't have time for an all-of-the-above approach anymore. We kind of need to move a little more rapidly if you're concerned about the heat waves hitting Europe right now, if you're concerned about water scarcity, if you're concerned about all the stuff that kind of we know is an issue. So how do we get from where we are today so that when I'm sitting around maybe with grandchildren, I don't know, my kids are 15, so probably not. In 25 years, I'm sitting around, it's 2050, whatever, just around that time frame. How did we get to the energy transition? So first, I want to say focus on efficiency. Again, this isn't rocket science, but I think it's critically important. This is the most bang for your buck. Anyone who was putting in solar 10 or 20 years ago, what do you think they did first? Because they didn't get a lot out of the solar panels back then. They did efficiency. It's like make the house less consumptive in terms of its energy needs and then put the solar in. The other thing we need to do is scale up wind and solar massively. This is what I was talking about, like economies of scale. It's great that we're at 81% in the US and 81% globally. We need to just keep making that happen. Russia's attack of Ukraine has not helped things. It could speed things up. It could slow things down. I'm going to go on the side of let's speed things up, but we need to scale these up. And it needs to be utility scale and distributed. We need to pair renewables with storage at scale. I just talked about that, so I won't spend any more time, but we got to do that. One thing I will say, there are a lot of breakthroughs in the energy storage space. So there's lithium-ion batteries, there's iron flow batteries, there's, of course, pumped hydro is the most prevalent form of energy storage right now. You can do air compression. There's all different ways of doing energy storage. And flow batteries like ESS right here in Portland. Electrify heating and vehicles ASAP. Here's the point. We could try to electrify everything, but it's not so easy. And there's only so many electrons to go around. So we're saying let's electrify transportation. That's one-wheelers, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, One-wheeler. Okay, that's interesting. That's my trigger. That's fun. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers. And right now, there's a company in Taiwan that has hundreds of million dollars in annual revenue. They just went public. They do two-wheelers. And they not only have a network where they're selling them and they have their own technology, they're doing a battery swap, because charging up isn't easy in parts of Asia. And so they just do a battery swap. You go to a location, they swap it out, and off you go. So we got to do that. And then right now in Europe, and I hope it's happening a bit, and the Japanese again, I lived in Japan many years ago. I had a mini split inverter in my homes way before I ever saw one in the US. Why do you think Fujitsu and Mitsubishi are the leaders in mini split inverters? These are the small heat pumps, electric heat pumps. We need to ship heat pumps right now to Europe. So that's the other area to focus, I believe. Gas for cooking, yeah, I think we can do that, but the bang for your buck is definitely in heating and transport. We need to modernize the transmission and distribution grids. Again, this is kind of a repeat of my thesis so far today. We didn't talk about this too much. I'm not sure about new nuclear. And again, I'm happy to field questions on that. But I do believe that the oil and gas interests and the large industrials are getting very serious about green hydrogen, ammonia, and fuels. And there's a reason. You can't electrify everything. I probably am not going to succeed right now at electrifying steel manufacturing or cement manufacturing or plastics. I need heat. I need molecules. And you could do that through green hydrogen, ammonia, and green fuels. So that's another area I think we're going to see quite a bit of development. And then finally, and I mentioned this earlier, this is critical for the national security interests of Japan, the US, and all of our partners. We need to find and source sustainably mined and recycled materials. And let me just tell you, one of the founders of Solar City, one of the people who was at Tesla, a number of very high-level Solar Cycle and some other companies that are coming out right now, are focused on recycling. Because you can take a lithium-ion battery pack, you can take that lithium, it's still good to use. Just needs to be taken out, reformatted, and put in another battery. So this is where we need to focus. China, I wrote a book, as you mentioned, it came out 15 years ago. 16 years ago, I went to Beijing to write the book. We knew we had to go to China. The Chinese have been smart. They have taken care of the supply that they need of rare earths, of lithium, of nickel, of copper. We have not been so great in the US. Now, Biden is using the Defense Production Act and some other stuff, but let's just say this is critical. It's a linchpin. And in closing on that, I just want to say that I believe the future of energy is not the extraction of fossil fuels, but the extraction and recycling of the key metals that are needed for the clean energy revolution. So I think those are my, that's it.
Yep. So thank you. I'd like to open up there. I have some questions, but let the audience, any questions you might have. Yes.
20 years ago, I put 250 solar panels on the roof of my winery, and today I get nothing out of it. I get taxed by Yamhill County on a regular basis for having an electric forklift to pass that lithium battery. What good is something if it is being reversed by the technology? A benefit is being reversed by the collection of taxes, I guess.
Yeah. So quick question about the 20-year-old panels. Do you know who manufactured those panels?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I don't know who it was. Most panels will last about 25 years. Today, you're going to get more than 25 years, maybe up to 30. You were a pioneer, so good for you. And I think you are feeling the impact of being a pioneer. If you put those panels on today, one, you wouldn't need as many because they're. Yeah, you're going to take it down. So you're like, I think Reagan did that. That isn't, I'm sorry to hear of your experience, but most panels are lasting 25 to 30 years, and the degradation on the panels have dramatically reduced. So they last a lot longer, and that is not what we're seeing in terms of the economics are there for people doing it new today. So
you might want to relook at
yeah.
reinvesting in that.
And I can't talk about the taxes. I don't know which one you got there.
Okay.
Where's the governor? Where'd she go?
Yeah, or a senator still.
I don't think she's 20 years ago.
Along those lines, what can policy and government do with purchasing or with other policies to help build those markets for new technology?
So I sort of, at the state level, you can do what California has done. So they will actually help to seed markets. And they did that with solar panels on rooftops. And they're doing it now with energy storage devices, because they will look out and they'll say sort of, where can we have the most impact? And so they'll have tax credits that you actually get at the state level. At the federal level, the tax credits have been one of the best. I don't know how much we need carbon credits and all that. That's much more difficult to get. But the tax incentives that we've seen at the state level in certain states and then at the federal level have done more than just about anything to get these technologies seeded. I think we'll probably see Biden do something, as I said, this week or next. He has to at this point, because Manchin was keeping him going, didn't happen. So what he can do at an executive order level, I don't know. I'm sure they're in back rooms right now or in rooms trying to figure that out.
Yes.
Can you use the microphone?
Wait for the microphone, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you mentioned Powin and energy storage, and we know they just opened up and brought some jobs to Portland. What are other areas in this industry, in this sector, that you see that Portland and really our region have a key comparative economic advantage in, and what can we look forward to in terms of the growth of these industries in our area?
Yeah, I think it's a great. When I moved to Portland 17 years ago, and Climate Solutions. I don't know how many of you know Climate Solutions. They work on clean energy action in the Northwest, and we did a report on the opportunities for the Pacific Northwest. That was informed 15 years ago. Where we are today, specifically for this region, it's difficult for me to say because I haven't done that research lately. I did mention, though, and I think this is true, I think energy storage is an opportunity. I think integration is and development is an issue, or a great opportunity. If you look at Portland, Vestas brought their headquarters here for a reason, but you also saw Avangrid and a whole slew of other people who package and develop utility scale storage and energy in particular. A lot of the brain trust is sitting here in Portland. I actually think Oregon, along with California, and interestingly enough, sort of the Rocky Mountain region, like around Boulder and Denver, are some of the hot spots for this type of opportunity. The other area is really design, I think, for this region. I think, we have the apparel industry, we've got architects, we've got a great artistic verve to Portland, a lot of independent thinkers. So I think design, and I'd have to think more about which companies those are, but definitely. And then probably some green building. There's been a lot of innovation in this area. Anything else that you would add to that, or that you think might be opportunities?
Well, we know some folks recently made a trip to Denmark and were observing a lot of the hydrogen infrastructure they have there.
Thank you.
But it requires tremendous amounts of accessible, affordable energy for the hydrolysis. So
right, but we have the solar and we have the wind, and that was a great point. Thank you and I know people who went on that trade mission. It was great. Actually, someone from Climate Solutions, Ross, who now has I think it's in Olympia, has an institute, took this trade mission to Denmark. And they looked at circularity and they looked at clean energy. And we have a group here called the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. Michelle Detweiler, I believe, is their executive director. They are very active in trying to create a green hydrogen hub in the Pacific Northwest. So I agree with you, that could be an opportunity for us.
Right. Thank you. Oh,
Senator?
If I could take the liberty of just responding a little bit to your question, in addition to Ron's point about what government can do. In Oregon, we recognize that encouraging industry, for example, to switch to electric vehicles is hard. So this year, for example, the state invested about $10 million to provide charging for industrial vehicles up on Swan Island, because putting that infrastructure in is expensive. And unless you know that you can charge your vehicles quickly, to your point, Ron, about your car, it's going to be hard to convince yourself to not only invest in buying the new vehicle, but also having to invest in the infrastructure. And the state plays a real role, as do cities and counties, but the state plays a real role in building out that infrastructure for whether it's our electric highways. You know, I drove out to Hermiston recently with a friend who was driving an EV, and we stopped in the Dalles for half an hour to charge there, right? So I think there's a role for the state to collaborate in providing that infrastructure that facilitates this transition and helps with the tipping point that you brought up.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, first of all, this is a great point that the senators brought up. It's not just passenger vehicles for individuals. It really it's the fleets, because the fleets can come in and out very easily. You can manage when you charge them in a much more efficient manner. So kudos to the state for doing that. And the other thing that I would say, I mean, I could talk for hours probably on what governments could do, but one thing I would say, I've worked closely with a number of folks on green banks. And I think the issue sometimes in getting a deal done is just that little extra bit of money. And so rather than the state going in and saying, you know, and I don't know about this example totally, but, you know, we have to fund the whole thing, what they'll often do is say, we'll cover this percent that the bankers won't cover. And it gets the deal done. That's what green banks do often. That's a simplified version of a green bank. But yeah.
That's actually kind of the role the state plays in a lot of these projects.
Yep.
It's analogous to, frankly, the $2 million that the state gave to help buy the property for the Japan Institute, right? Steve and his team had made it clear that they were going to be raising a ton of money. We came in with this
they covered
small,
that increment of that piece that no one else can do.
That piece on top of it to contribute, because we recognize the value of it. And it's the same thing here. We didn't cover the entire cost of this new infrastructure on Swan Island. We covered a big chunk of it because it's in everybody's best interest for us to do that, right? And we do the same thing with tax credits for EVs or tax credits for solar, which we still do for residential applications, for exactly the points that you're making, which is heating and vehicles. We've got a huge heat pump program that we're providing in the state, especially for lower income families, to help them convert to deal with things like the heat crisis, the heat dome that we saw last year. So those are some of the ways that we're trying to help push those conversions that you highlight in item 4 up there.
Yeah, cities and states and nations can do a lot. And I would just add one other thing. I didn't mention it. I think an RPS, a renewable portfolio standard, is really the tool. You basically are saying that by a certain date, we're going to go from whatever we're at today to, let's say, 100% clean energy, renewable electricity. Those have been huge drivers. California's ahead of the curve on what their goals were. And we're seeing that in lots of other nations as well as in other government and regions. So,
and you know we have one here.
Of course. And no coal.
Right.
So there are levers that, and if I didn't say this earlier, from Clean Edge's very beginning, we saw a three-legged stool of technology innovation, policy innovation, and capital innovation. And you need all three. The whole idea of the stool is you take one of the legs away, it's going to topple over. So yes, government, tech, and capital. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Ron.
much. It's been great.
Invite Darren up. And I have a couple of interim slides to welcome our next guest. And one of the points I would make to build on that dialogue that you were just having is another thing the state can do that will be very helpful is help the grid transition to that dynamic distributed model that Ron was talking about. And I think that will help our rural partners also be able to integrate more renewable energy into their business. So, oh yes, there were a couple of other slides that you had about ag innovation. And so we didn't get a chance to cover those, but if I could just do it on your behalf. The buckets that Ron put together here are advanced agriculture technology, alternative protein and dairy offerings, and food systems infrastructure. And there are companies doing all of those things. And then sustainable farming and fishery practices and water management. So those are some new areas that Clean Edge is looking at. And I think those important kinds of innovations are going to be beneficial impacts into the farming industry. So as we said earlier, Oregon and Japan are major trading partners. In 2017, there was over $2 billion in trade, and a third of Oregon's exports are sold to Japan. In the food and agriculture in 2017, trade was almost a third of $1 billion. And Japan imports 90% of its wheat, and I hadn't really thought about this, but noodles and breads and cakes and other kinds of products use a lot of wheat. And then about 18% of Oregon's wheat goes to Japan, and Darren may have some updates to those statistics. So this is a picture of the wheat harvest happening right now in Colorado, and you can see there's wind turbines on this property as well as beautiful wheat being harvested. As the climate changes, the system has to adjust, and there are risks that need to be addressed, and there's opportunities for innovation. And I think Ron did a beautiful job of really delving into the innovation opportunities that are already underway. And then also, while the farmer is operating their farm on their own, they also have a whole network of influence, people and industries that they influence and who also support them. So there are ag equipment and chemical and seed companies that are providing ideas and inputs and tools and solutions, and the farmer also communicating back with them about what their needs are. There's research, and we'll be asking Darren to talk about some of the research that OSU is doing for the Oregon farmers. Government policy that we've talked a little bit about here already. Food aid is really important. And then insurance and finance, and of course customers. So there's a flow of information back and forth between the person who's producing the food that we eat and all these different parties that are necessary for bringing that food to market. So that's, can we turn this screen off just for our discussion? Is that okay? Or just leave it on, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so Darren, you have been...
Before we start, Marianna,
yeah.
could I say something real quick?
Of course, of course.
I had the privilege of meeting Prime Minister Abe a couple of years ago. I attended the signing of the U.S.-Japan trade agreement and got to spend a few minutes with him. It was a small amount of time, but we all get our first impressions, and I consider he was a very gracious man. And when you see somebody like that who meets a terrible ending, it kind of hits home. And it's quite a loss. He seemed like a very good man. So anyway, just wanted to say that I had the privilege of meeting him. So
thank you so much. And
we were in New York at the time. So anyway, got that out.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very somber time to remember such an important person. First, if you can tell us something about your operation. As a multi-generational farmer, what are some of the practices you use to sustain your operation? How does it work?
Well, sustainability is a very arbitrary word in some ways because people want you to be sustainable. You never want to not be. But to me, you go out, my farm has been there since 1910. Many have been there since the late 1800s in our area. So to me, that's sustainable. But people want you to be sustainable, and I think we are, but somehow people don't think you are. And I don't know how, we raise more now per acre than we ever have. This year, how many people in here got tired of the rain that lived here in the Willamette Valley? You laugh, but that makes food. And all that food, much of it goes to Japan. A lot of you will say, well, it's raining this weekend, I don't get to go hike or go to the Japanese gardens or something like that. My end, it's tens of thousands. If we get an inch of rain in May or June, we call it $1 million rains. And that's food. because most of your wheat growing regions are not irrigated. If you can irrigate, you're going to grow something more valuable than wheat. Wheat is the last thing you grow when you can't grow anything else. That's why we do it on 10 to 12 inches of moisture on the east side of the Cascades, and most of the PNW is on a summer fallow system, which means I'm going to harvest 4,000 acres this year, my family will, but there's also 4,000 acres that are being rested because we cannot grow a crop economically every year. So this piece of ground will grow a crop one year in even years, and this piece of ground grows a crop in odd years. I manage moisture as much as any irrigator, even though I don't have a sprinkler other than for my lawn. And that means keeping weeds free, using fallow. We've gone to the latest systems of no-till direct seed farming. It used to take us close to 3 gallons of fuel per acre to till and prepare and plant the crop. Now we do that on 1 gallon an acre. So I would say that's pretty significant, and that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years. But technology is a huge part of that. GPS, all the things that you've probably heard. Everybody knows what an iPad is. That's kind of the stuff you do. We go out, and when we harvest, we now have GPS that does down to a 60 square foot zone as the combine moves. The data is being read into it. When you get done, you take your thumb drive down and go to your local neighborhood technology person, say, take this. They plug it in, and you see your yields. Then you take soil samples every year. You see what nutrients are in the soil and how much you need to add to make an optimal crop. I'm making decisions in September for the next year. You kind of have to look at the law averages. Some years are wet, some years are dry. Last year was one of the driest years we had. This year, we cut 60% of a crop. This year, we're probably going to cut 120%. Japan will have a very good supply of low-protein wheat, which they really like. By the way, our kind of wheat grown in the PNW is predominantly used as Triscuits, Oreo cookies, Ritz crackers, a little bit in noodles. There's not much gluten to it. Sponge cake, Christmas cakes, is very important to the Japanese customer. It's very like a confectionery flour. If you try to grow a loaf of bread out of soft white wheat, it gets about that high and falls apart. Your red wheat is going to be in the Midwest, or your high-quality pasta wheat's going to be North Dakota, Montana. There's different classes for different uses. It's not just wheat, okay? So we grow some of the best soft white, a very unique crop, as in soft white wheat, because it's a minor crop on the big scheme of things. In 1949, a group of Oregon people went to Japan after the war, and they started on their baking. And that is what has led into being U.S. Wheat Associates today, is that group of Oregonians working in tandem with the Japanese, and has now become a worldwide organization. So there's a long history there of the U.S. farmers developing markets with other people.
And can you talk more about U.S. Wheat Associates and what role does it play?
Well, one other little thing about the scale that we farm at, I said 4,000 acres, and everybody goes, oh my God. It is a lot of acres. There's 2 of us. My son and I take care of that. Most of the time we hire one high school kid during the summer to help us. We'll harvest that in 3.5 weeks, maybe 4, depending on breakdowns. We move 7 times, but that's the efficiency of it. A bushel of wheat. What is a bushel of wheat? Anybody know? If you put it in a sack, it's a little bit bigger than that speaker. 1 bushel of wheat will make 67 loaves of bread. Okay, with luck, we'll cut 200,000 bushels this year. Multiply that times 67, and that gives you the scale of what the U.S. farmer is doing. We're not the biggest, we're not the smallest, but that is the scale that we are at. We have to have our inputs, we have to have our fertilizers, our fuels, and unfortunately, that's where we're at today. But I'm sorry to get off on that, but I want to give you the scale, because if I just say bushels, nobody really understands that. But we understand what a loaf of bread is.
How many loaves of bread does that translate to?
Well, who's got their smartphone? I actually figured that out. Well, it's 134 million, give or take.
Wow.
And that's one little podunk farm. Or I don't know how many Christmas cakes that's going to make. I don't know how many Oreo cookies. But I like to convert things to cookies and crackers on Facebook because it's fun. So
So talk about the trade association and how
Okay, well,
how it
US
operates.
Wheat isn't set policy. That's our sister. That's National Association of Wheat Growers. That's the people that go, which I've been part of. And it's all volunteers. I mean, I don't get paid anything to be here or to go do I get reimbursed, but, and I decline to be paid here today. I just do it because it's the right thing to do. I think my lodging is going to be covered. Thank you very much, though. But the policy side, we tax ourselves a nickel. Each state does it differently. In the state of Oregon, we tax ourselves a nickel. And that goes into a pot.
Per bushel.
Per bushel. And then that gets distributed by, I'm on what they call the Oregon Wheat Commission. And that's distributed Oregon State University gets 40% of that nickel. A little bit goes to US Wheat Associates, which is the marketing helping end that's got. So we have two domestic offices, one in Virginia, one in Portland, and we have 13 overseas offices, predominantly in Asia, but also Cape Town, Morocco, Mexico City, Santiago, Taipei, Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore, Beijing, and I should have written these down. I used to be able to tell them. But you get the idea. And of course, being in the PNW, I have a tighter tie with the Asian countries than my brethren in the Midwest and stuff is more Mexico and Africa. Japan is our number 3 market. You have a shrinking demographic. But Nishin Milling is 40% of Japan's milling. They actually buy 5% of the U.S. wheat crop on average. Wow. So they swing a very big stick, even though number 1 market's typically Mexico, and then the Philippines has now evolved, and then Korea and Nigeria fight for number 4 and 5. So U.S. Wheat Associates, our overseas, will typically have 4 or 5 people in an office. We'll have technical people. So let's say you buy a bushel of wheat and it comes in and it's not milling right. We have technical people that can go in and pop the hood and say, you need to do this, adjust this, whatever, and make it do better. Okay, we got that. Now we got the flour. Well, it's not making a big cookie. It's making a little cookie. Flour is like gasoline or kilowatts. You get so much energy or size out of it, and you want to get the most you can of efficiency out of it, right? So we also have baking specialists that will go in and say, you need to do this, or you need to temper your wheat longer, or you need to put this additive in, or something like that. And so that's what our overseas people do. Of course, U.S. wheat is always the best, right? Now, Australia and Canada would be our nearest competitors for the most part. They don't offer quite that service like U.S. wheat does, and we're always open for business. We never shut down our exports. You may not like what you have to pay, but it is available. And right now, prices are high, so everybody's sensitive to it. And I have to explain to people, well, yes, the prices are high, but my inputs are high. My fertilizer this year will triple from what it was last year. My fuel is, was $2.50 a gallon. Now it's $5 to $5.50 right now. Fertilizer was 30 cents a pound. Now it's pushing $1. And there may be shortages of it.
So one of the things that you've done that really impressed me is hosting delegations so that the people who are buying the wheat can experience what life is like on your farm and and then you can build those personal relationships. Can you talk about that?
So one of the things we have what we call trade groups, and our overseas person, Rick Notario from Japan, will bring a group in. Down by the Broadway Bridge is the wheat marketing, is the Albers Mill building. That's also the wheat marketing center. And we bring people from all over the world to come in there, and you show them why U.S. wheat makes more cookies or a better noodle or whatever. And we'll have Australian wheat. We'll have Canadian wheat. And they make their comparisons. Last week there was a group from South Africa in that I got to go down and meet. But they come through and they have different purposes for different things. Like there's a group that came in from the Philippines and they wanted to make saltine crackers, and it had to be 15 in a package this big, not 14, not 16. And they spent 2 weeks trying to get the cracker with the right thickness. For whatever reason, I don't know, but we're happy to help them out and take their money. And that's the kind of things they want to do. And if you test an Australian U.S. blend noodle against a straight U.S. or a straight Australian, honestly, the better noodle's the mix of the two. Just the climatic conditions and the agronomy stuff. So they'll come in, and a lot of times part of it is they'll go see an export facility like you've seen on the river. You go to United Grain, Columbia, whoever. FIGUS, who is your Federal Grain Inspection Standards. Every bushel of grain that's sold is guaranteed by the U.S. government and tested that when it gets overseas, this is what you bought. You want number one wheat, this protein, this stockage. That's the insurance policy. And I've had a Korean group said, you know, this is what we like because we're going to get what we say we're going to, you say we're going to get. And that's part of our system. Well, one of the things they do sometimes is they do a farm visit. I live 2 hours east of Portland. Shanti's family lives about 3 miles from me over the hill. And her mother probably babysat me at some point growing up.
Your mother babysat me.
Well, that's the way it works. A lot of the elderly ladies, if you walk into our local store, probably change my diapers at some time. So between Joanne and Penny and everybody, they're still going strong. But anyway, you're 2 hours away, so they'll come and do a farm visit. Sometimes we're harvesting, like we'll have a group from Vietnam in a couple of weeks. They're going to have to come out to the field. We don't have a lot of time. We'll give them rides on the combines, that kind of thing, you know, hold the wheat, the fresh wheat that's just been cut. By the way, wheat will keep forever if you keep it in storage and don't let bugs and moisture get to it. The Egyptian tombs had wheat in it, still viable, okay? That's a neat part about it is it keeps. 20% of the world's caloric intake comes from wheat, by the way. So it's very important. Nobody really thought much about it until Mr. Putin invaded the Ukraine, and now all of a sudden we somehow have this new importance. But anyway, they come out. Well, the cool thing about being where I am is I've had opportunities to spend time in Tokyo and go to Korea and Jakarta and Bangkok, and I've seen the most advanced countries. Japan. I've seen some of them, they're just their belly buttons chewing on their backbone and they're trying to make enough food to feed themselves. And that really hits you when you're just a farm boy that picks rocks and pounds fence posts for a living. And you see that diversity in where your food goes. Anyway, so the people from my end don't see that, and a lot of the people from the milling and end user don't see that. We don't see each other. And that's the way it is in a lot of industries. So when they come up to the farm, I call up the neighbors. We go buy 40 pounds of tri-tip, throw it on the smoker. My little local store in Grass Valley, population 150, will cater the salads and stuff. We get the neighborhood together. We put chairs and tables up in the backyard. I have one rule is you can't sit with each other because it's like church. The group that comes will sit together and my group will sit together. We got to mix everybody up or you don't get anything out of it. And make sure there's a little English spoken at each table. You have to do that. And we have a lady that comes in, she sets up the wine division, and we'll have the beverage of your choice and that kind of thing. And you make that connection that you normally wouldn't get to do. Sometimes it just depends on the time of year. If it's in June, we'll do a farm tour and stuff. A lot of people, we live next to a field that we farm. And let's face it, chemicals are front and center. Japan being probably the most sensitive to chemistry and stuff. So one of the things I do, and I didn't realize, is we go out and I'm standing there looking at my field. There's my well. This is the garden hose with water coming out of it. You take a drink of water. Well, most people have never drank water out of a hose. And there's no chemicals in it. There's no chlorine. It's just water. And I said, I'm not going to mess in my own nest. It's in my best interest to make sure that I use only what I need to and nothing more in an environmentally responsible way. A lot of my visitors have never thrown the Frisbee for a dog. We have a border collie that will run all day long if you throw on the Frisbee. So they get to do that. I like to drive out in the middle of nowhere up on top of a field because a lot of my guests have never seen a skyline with no buildings on it. Things like that, just an experience. And when I go to downtown Tokyo, I'm scared to death because it's like this. But I have some very, very gregarious guests that have always treated me very well, but it's the different surroundings that you're in. And then the coolest thing is when you've had people on your farm and then you go overseas and then you go, hey, I was on your farm, and you get to go have dinner with them or something like that. And they make that connection on their turf and on my turf. And that's probably the most rewarding thing about this position. A few more months, I'll be a has-been and long gone. I'm past president this year. I was chairman for a year. COVID hit. Normally when you're chairman, you've got your frequent flyer miles. I did such a good job, they had me be a second year because I went nowhere. I was out of the country one time, and that was to Santiago in November, and that was it as chairman. I've traveled much more just as a regular board member up to, the last time I'd been out of the country prior to that was to go to Tokyo in 2019. And we were treated like kings. We went to a place called the Grand Palace that I will remember forever. That was just amazing. And the Japanese attention to detail. They found out I would prefer whiskey over wine. So as I came through the door, I picked up my wine glass, and pretty soon it disappeared, and a tumbler showed up in my hand. I don't know where she came from, but they did it very well. And then when we would go interact with the guests and exchange your cards, the tumbler would disappear. I don't know where it went. We would exchange our cards, and it would reappear. And anyway, it made a very big impression about the attention to detail that
Well,
happens.
I think that really brings us full circle to the opening comments from Steve Bloom and the Sasakawa Foundation of the importance of multicultural exchange and this nice bridge between the clean tech future that we have and the food that we eat, and how important those two things are
One
together.
of the things people ask me is, a lot of times you get the 20-somethings in, and they go, well, these are not, they're not the leaders of Nation or anything like that. Yeah, but they will be. And I've been around long enough now that those people that were the newbies are now making decisions. And you just treat people the way you want to be treated. It's that simple. Give them a good meal, visit, learn a little bit about each other, and the world flattens out an awful lot. And I will never be able to repay what I took out of this. I took so much more away than I'll ever leave behind. And then to have opportunity to come down and babble on to people like yourselves. So,
Well,
anyway,
thank you so much. And contact information if people want to ask follow-up questions. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And we're ready to move on to our next panel topic here, Weaving the Common Threads, New Creative Dynamics in U.S.-Japan Partnership. And now we want to talk about kind of the creative class here and how it impacts this relationship and what the future of that looks like. And I think we have three cutting edge, and I'm sorry to say we were supposed to have also the CEO of Wacom here with us today, but he has COVID and wasn't able to leave Japan, unfortunately. So we're wishing him a speedy recovery, but unfortunately he's not able to be with us today. But I'll introduce our moderator and two panelists that we have today. And Željka Carol Kekez is the founder and principal at Place. Now, when you read through her biography, she's like the perfect human being for someone who runs my kind of organization because she's an urban designer, a professor, author, curator, and explorer. She's a founding partner of her innovative design studio called Place, which embraces the idea of a better world through synergies between nature, art, philanthropy, and placemaking. Absolutely perfect. So why are you not on our board? So we'll talk afterwards. Carol, we'll go with Carol, has had the chance to travel all over the world, really preaching about these ideals and bringing together all of these things into places that make better places to live for humanity and places that we can interact with each other. So Carol will be our moderator today, so please welcome to the stage, Carol. And next we have Takeshi Homma, who is the founder and CEO of Homma Group. I had a chance to talk with him last night and find his interesting background. And he worked for Sony at one point. We had some common friends there. And interesting when you look at his background, his family was 15 generations building shrines and temples in Japan. And while he is now building homes, it's very much a different thing. But he has continued in that multi-generational line of builders. And so he was first a builder of companies and now the builder of a company that builds smart homes with innovative technologies, again, for better, creative, more, let's call it integrated living. So we're very honored and pleased that you could be with us today. And so please join us. And then John Jay is the President and Executive Creative Director of GX, Global and president of Global Creative for UNIQLO and Fast Retailing. And John and I guess our paths crossed maybe 12 years ago when Sam Adams, who was mayor at the time, said, "Have you ever met John Jay?" And I had not, I must admit. And having a chance to meet John, of course, as with anyone who meets John, he just instantly blows your mind because there's so much going on up there, so much creative energy, so much just energy. And so, of course, he was much of the creative mind behind Wieden & Kennedy for many years and actually opened Wieden & Kennedy offices in Asia, being based in the Tokyo office there. And then it was not too long ago, maybe 5 years ago now, that Mr. and Mrs. Yanai, who, by the way, were sitting in the Yanai family classroom, were great supporters of the garden, at UNIQLO, came to Portland. I remember they jumped on a plane and they poached you and said, "We want you to come work for us." And since then, working for Wieden & Kennedy was able to transform UNIQLO into the global company it is today, and now as the global creative director has really taken it to an entirely different level. And so, John, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, and everyone who made this exchange possible. We understand that all of you could have been at many different places this afternoon, but you chose to actually be here with us and to engage in this pursuit of peace. And that means this serene beauty of the gardens that we are surrounded by, maybe a personal inner peace, or building on the connections of the cultural diplomacy. And so for that, our panel and all of us are internally grateful. So thank you, and arigatou gozaimasu. Yeah. When I think about this invitation, I really reflect back on the idea that as growing up in Yugoslavia, and I'm a native of Croatia, one of the first memories of my encounter with Japan culture was Montreal 76. And that's the Summer Olympic Games. And my father was an amazing sports fan. And so I fall in love immediately with this iconic flag that represented the land of the rising sun. And it's only with the time that I learned and became even more enchanted with geography and nature and architecture and fashion and beauty of the culture. And that culture extended through both small encounters and large encounters. And I would be remiss not to mention that working with the place colleagues who are Japanese and do work with us here locally in Portland and also in Japan is one of the greatest treasures of showing up to work every day. So when we think about at place, about Japan and what it means to us, we think about it as a world leader in education and in commerce and technology. But we also think about it as a symbol and a model for international arts and culture hub. So most recently, about hosting 2020 Summer Olympics, and kind of brought memories back immediately to this idea of art of shokunin and shokunin and omoteshin. And so even if the terms are challenging or maybe not be as familiar, I think Darren was talking about this notion of the hospitality. And that's what really you walk away with, the idea of the culture and experiences, people-to-people connections. So I'm honored and humbled both to be here with John Jay and that to share and learn from them. Because as somebody who is an outsider, truly, to have that opportunity to be all over the world and experience Japan, and what we share in common, how those ideas both inspire and shape our creative processes, it's something that we're going to talk about today. So 12 years ago when we started Place, really the idea was to think about a different business model, to think about how do we create a studio that is creative. And we started with this idea of Place. In a similar way that we are surrounded here in Portland Japanese Garden, we think about these forest giants that are kind of rooting up to the sky and thinking about connecting to the ancient wisdom. But in the same time, they are rooted to the land. And that way, when I think about our multicultural team and Place and our personal journeys to the Pacific Northwest, I think about our interconnectedness. So I just want to take you a little bit on a journey of the team, of its 20 plus creatives that are connected with the passion to make the world a better place. And even though if you might not have the opportunity today, I invite you to come and visit us. If you are to walk into our space, you would be greeted with experimental art, the temporary installations, a number of nonprofit organizations that call our studio home, and the idea that we either do it here at home or if we go across the world and do similar collaborations with the artists like here at the Swarovski Crystal Welton Outdoor Sculpture Garden and the museum. It's the beauty of the Pacific Northwest ethos and the regionalism that we try to explore both on intimate scale and the residential level here, or the large-scale planning efforts of companies that are global leaders like Nike World Headquarters, where we spent the last 7 years creating home for the world amazing athletes like Serena Williams. Our team is absolutely obsessed with this idea of an outdoor comfort, the idea of how we can innovate. I'm thinking about Ron's presentation earlier, talking about the infrastructure. Everything that he has talked about, it's the layer beneath of what we kind of put forward, the idea of the beauty. And so here is this notion of transversing past, present, and future, thinking about the heritage and celebrating diversity. In this example of the Be True Torii gates that are on the local campus here. And then similarly, narrating stories of people like founder at Nike who had strong connections between both Oregon and Japan, and translating that to the really seasonal elements of celebrating the nature, or nature that we bring indoors, like it partners with Port of Portland, where this is a upcoming terminal. It's an actually existing terminal that is under construction right now. And celebrating, again, the ideas of the biophilia, elements of the civic core in Portland, which is Edith Green Wendell Wyatt Federal Office Building, where we are bringing the elements of nature, the idea of the stewardship into the process of the design and creativity. And so it's this idea of the stewardship and trying to break the barriers both in education, in housing, in recreation that we think about in terms of the placemaking. These are the ideals that we aspire to, that are the kind of founding concept of our work, playing to the senses. Similar way that we are going to be engaging here in a conversation shortly, or taking our ideas and exporting the notion of the community building, or in Japan, Machizukuri. And we have had a great privilege of working with communities from Okinawa to Hokkaido, north and south, throughout Japan for the past 10 years. We are currently working in Hiroshima. This is the project in Setagaya. And to close it, I would just like to invite you all, maybe it's not gonna go. Yep.
Don't steal my presentation.
I'm not gonna steal your presentation. I would like to leave you with this idea of when you walk into our space, instead of being greeted by the receptionist, there is a galleria space. And that galleria, it's really a public space within our private studio. And it welcomes any passerbys that come by or any one of you by invitations. Right now, because we are working in Hiroshima, we have opted to create artist in residence. This is Motoi Yamamoto, who will be here in August. And he's going to be creating a temporary art installation that is all based in salt. And we heard earlier talking about it in terms of the ocean, an ocean that brings us together between the two countries, between the US and Japan, and salt as an element both of our natural body, but also the body that it's part of the ocean too. So if you are up and around in August, just knock on the door, ring the doorbell, come and see us. He'll be there for 2 weeks. And I look forward to hearing in the same way about these common threads of the creativity that Tad is going to be talking about in terms of technology and how technology and design work together in order to create connectivity and communication amongst us.
Thank you. Hi, this is Ted Homma. I'm very feeling special feeling today because 4 years ago, when I decided, when I first come to the Portland, before I decided to come to the business in Portland, I visited here, and I'm pretty impressed. Wow, such a beautiful Japanese garden exists outside of Japan. You know, I have no knowledge about it, but I'm pretty impressed, and I should come to here. Then I decided, and I'm sitting here today and talking about business in 4 years. It's a very special day for me. Thank you so much for having me today, Aki. So to begin with, let me talk about our company. We started the company in the Silicon Valley in 2016. The reason why I started this company is that to look at 100 years innovation. Phone became the smartphone as you're using today. And then the car became EV and autonomous driving, very common, and still 5% in the United States, but it's growing. But looking at the home, it's almost the same, right? Maybe that all the home, all the pictures still existing over there, I guess. So then why is this going to happen? So I have complained, being in the United States more than 10 years, I want to change this one, like iPhone and Tesla Rebel innovation could happen, and we can change the world a better place. That's how we start a company. But in the contrast between Japan and the United States, I see an interesting fact here. For example, in Japan, it's a very prefabrication and industrialization happening on off-site construction happening, like system kitchen unit bus in Japanese, we call it. So we produce everything in a factory, deliver to the site, installed in 2 days. And then, in Japan, home can be complete within 1 year from the scratch, even a custom home. Then more than 50% of home being custom made in Japan. But in the United States, home building is very conventional, on-the-site construction, cutting the wood and then, building everything on the site. If it rains and it stops the construction, so that can happen. Then inefficient, construction process and then labor shortage is going to happen. So then custom-made home is only 2% because it takes about 2-3 years from the scratch to the end. So that's a big difference. But from my perspective, this is opportunity for Japanese industry because you see this comparison, US-Japan house completion per year. So in 2018, it's been changed because Japanese population is declining, and then we don't need a home anymore in Japan. But the US population is still growing. We need a home here. It's a shortage, right? So it's an opportunity for both in the United States and Japan, bringing opportunity and innovation from Japan and in the US soil. So that's how I see in the beginning of the company. So then what we are doing today is that in the beginning, we are doing only on the left-hand side. So we just are doing the tech startup, developing the software, making a home smart. It's pretty, common, starting from the, scaling, leveraging only the technology. But what we found after a couple of years we started a company was when we tried to sell the new home, smart home technology to the home builders, and then they didn't listen to us. They don't care because they just want to build a home as they want, as they have experienced. They don't want to use any new technology and a new product they never have used. So they want to stick into the traditional, conventional, on-the-site, home building. That's the reason why it cannot be changed. No innovation happening. Okay. Then after a while, we have decided, okay, we can be a builder instead of them. Then now we are doing the right-hand side is a home builder. So we acquire the land. We design the home in-house architect, and then we work with a general contractor to complete the home and then sell it. So we are a mini developer. We are mini home builder. And then it's a hardware side. On the left-hand side, it's software. So we develop the smart home technology software side in the house. So we can integrate software and hardware into the one product. This is exactly the same what the Tesla iPhone is doing, because Tesla developed not only for the hardware, but they developed the key technology, key software technology like autopilot software and then battery management software. It's pretty important for them. And then they make the very innovative car with that. And then iPhone, they designed the hardware. Of course, they work with the external company to produce it, but they design all the hardware, and they have iOS and App Store, which is very key component for the experience. But what's happening in the home industry? Home builder is one company, and the software company is one company. So what happened on you is that if you want to make your home smart, only there are three problems. One, you have to do it retrofit. You have to buy something from Amazon. You have to install. And then second problem, DIY. You have to be expert to install everything. And then the third, automation is pretty hard. And then only you can do is that just manually control from your app. But app has a lot of different app by manufacturer, by company, and then different ID and login. And then otherwise you can do it. Alexa and Google Home can control it. But you have to proactively control the smart home by yourself. It's not automation at all. Mm-hmm. So then now we are trying to solve that problem. So this is a project we have just completed this spring on the Burnside and 52nd Street. It's pretty close to you, by the way. I've been living here by the end of January by myself. It's a dog hooding in a tech industry, we call it. So I tested my product every day from morning to night, and then automation, tuning, finding the bugs, and then try to contact my team by Slack, and then fix the bug. So that's my daily life. But it's pretty interesting because I understand the value of it, and then I can tell anything, and then I can communicate with a resident of the other unit. So this is a 6 buildings and an 18-unit townhome project. So one unit has the 1,100 square foot, the 2-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, and then all the lighting system on the ceiling, on the cove light and the pendant light, everything's been connected and smart. And then this is the first of its kind, the move-in ready smart home. So the thing is, first of all, you don't have to control anything. You don't have to install by yourself. You just, in the house, just live in there. So then do it for me concept. So adaptive lighting sensors, there are a lot of sensors on the ceiling, and that detects your motion. And then if you enter the pantry, turn off the lights. And after 1 minute, turn off the lights. It's pretty normal, right? But the difference is, if you're sitting in a living room couch, and then in the morning, the light is much more brighter and a cooler color and much more shining because you need to wake up. And then in the evening, it's more in a soft, warm color. We have a preset algorithm at the automation. And then if you go to bed upstairs, it turns off automatically. So we have a lot of preset for the lighting, HVAC, and then smart lock system. So you don't have to touch anything. Well, why we have to have a mobile app? So that reason why you have to control your account, your home family member. And then if you go to the vacation, oh, shoot, I forget to turn off the AC. You can do it remotely from Japan even. And then if you want to change the patterns, like a preset, I want to start my morning on Saturday from 9 a.m., but I have changed my behavior. I want to start from 6 a.m. So you can change it from a mobile app easily. So that's only the request and use to our mobile app. And then you can give your friend mobile PIN code to open your smart door lock. So that's only you need to do it. But everything works perfectly. And then experience-wise, I don't want to talk about tech too much. Our smart home doesn't have any iPad on the wall. most of you guys imagine that a smart home has an iPad on the wall and then controlling lighting and HVAC and then no, you don't have to do that. No interface of technology. It's very important. That's the integration because we developed the whole homes from the design from the scratch. So we understand where the best sensor location and then how do we efficiently design wiring and then how might supply the power to each devices. So we can do it from the design perspective. And then we can build in, we can set it up, and then all the residents, live in the Homma house Mount Tabor, just receiving the invitation email and then create an account, download app. That's it. So then experience-wise, no need to touch light switches. So if I go to Japan travel and then I stay at a hotel, why I have to turn on the light and then go to the bathroom at night? But our bathroom understand myself, and then when I go to the bathroom 2 a.m., it not very bright. It softly turn on the lights and then very warm color. And then if I go back to bed, then I turn off the light. So that's a no need touch light switches experience. And then also designed to work from day one because you don't have to learn anything. You don't have to learn new devices, new software. So everyone can use it. Even the senior and then kids doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't have to do anything. So that's very easy. So that's our technology we developed. And then these are smart light switch and LED light and doorbell and action switch and smart lock and everything being smarter. But the beauty of that in-house development, we can easily collaborate many Japanese company, American company, European company to integrate with our software technology. So for example, Homma House is the third project we have done. The second project, the Homma 1, which is done in Northern California. But you can see a lot of Japanese company names on top of it. So we collaborate a lot of Japanese company before. The Homma 1 is not very hardware integrated, just bringing their technology and then putting the place it in a room. And then, it works nicely. But the Homma House has a much more deeper integration. For example, not very famous in the United States, but Iris Oyama is the LED #1 market share company. We co-developed the smart lighting system. They have a good lighting system for office and hotels and retail space, not good for the residential space because the software is the key. So they integrate our software automation algorithm so we can make it such a whole house lighting automation. And then Daikin, they have big factory in Houston, Texas, and then they are using their mini split, and then we have integration and control the light HVAC system throughout our mobile app, and then automatically censored. And then who is behind the company is that we have raised $34 million to date, mainly from very successful Japanese entrepreneurs like Rakuten, Mercari, and Sosnex, and then Grease. Mashioka, maybe someone knows, some of you guys know, one of the main act of the Heroes drama series, invested in us. And then also Japanese venture capital and Japanese enterprises like Docomo and Kokyo, such a big company included. But thing is, I raised the money from Japan, investing in Portland. But I'm keep doing that. We have already acquired a land in Woodstock near the New Season Market. So we are going to develop the 26 units of the townhome project, townhome mixed use and retail and then flat. So that should be completed in 2 years. Now we will get the investment from Japanese enterprise as well. And then team members, we born global. Of course, it's very natural. All the team members speaks English here, but from Japanese perspective, it's pretty rare because all our members, maybe more than 80% of our team members based in the United States, Silicon Valley and in Portland. We have 3 full-time here, and then Seattle and Japan. So all the people speaks Japanese, and then we are a global team, but many different professional team members, like architectural design, technology, and financial design, but something like that. Sorry, I spent too much time for that.
No, that's great. Before we go and have a chance to speak with John, I just want to mention that you offered last night when we were talking about that you would give us all tour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
Great.
I'm leaving for Japan tomorrow, but I will come back.
Okay, sounds great.
So let me, in closing, let me share 3 different keywords for discussion. Sorry for the long, but I decided to come to United States and stay here. I came here as an expert, at the Sony, but I found that go global or die from Japanese perspective, because Japanese population declining in a senior age, and GDPs are getting smaller and smaller. So no space to grow in Japan. That's the reason why I decided to come to the United States and stay here. And then many of Japanese company or Japanese people have a mindset like, oh, we need to import this great product and great technology to United States. No. We should make it globalized, because our home doesn't have any Japanese flavor. Like a Japanese garden is a great example, because not just import, they try to include and localize, globalize, in the fusion with the local culture. That's the reason why very few Japanese visitors are here, but most of the visitors are from the local and American people. That's pretty honor, and then that's a great globalization example, I think. So we can do it. Our business to come to the United States like a Japanese garden here. And the last one, why this happened? But the thing is, my best word in my life word, the best way to predict future is to invent it. So it's important what kind of future we want to create. So I want to get out from Japan and then stay here for Japan, and then try to make the Japanese culture, Japanese product and technology to globalize, and then for the sake of the U.S. people, make the world a better place. So that's what I'm doing here. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ted. John, looking forward to your presentation.
This one.
Well, the great advantage of being in this position, I let all the smart people talk first, and then so that's a good position to be in. So I thought I'd take a little interesting, I hope it's interesting. I think sometimes we underestimate the power of our city and the power of our community and the power of our creative talent in this state and in this city and in this neighborhood. So I want to talk a little bit about that, about the power of Portland and its creative community. So I'm going to show you some real problems that were solved through Portland. So the X. I'm going to talk about the symbol here. The X is a sign of collaboration, and it's very strong in popular culture, and it's very strong in Japan. And I would say that Tokyo and Portland has this strong history of collaboration, of creative collaboration. And I'm going to talk and give some evidence to that. In 1998, this was my first presentation. When I opened Wieden Kennedy in Tokyo and the Nike jet landed, my first presentation was this one, the Tokyo City Attack, and it was about getting deep into the city, into the culture of Tokyo. So this is one page out of my book, and it talked about one figure, Hiroshi Fujiwara, the godfather of urban culture, one of the most powerful Japanese people in the world that you may not have known of unless you're in fashion and in design. The king, the godfather of influence. So that chart that I gave to Nike talked about collaboration, how people were able to, brands, for example, would do what we call double branding. One brand and another brand joining to create a new brand. And sometimes what would be interesting in Japan is that competitors would do double branding. Two fashion designers who are competitors join together to create a new brand. This is unusual back then. Let me get this. And then 10 years later, the fellow on the left there is the late Alex Calderwood. He is the creator of the Ace Hotel. So he and I put together this book on collaborations based on the X. And this collaboration that the ACE started here in Portland extends itself all over the world today. This is Kengokuma's building and Alex Calderwood's creation. It happened after Alex passed. This is the Ace Hotel in Kyoto. So this is a direct connection to Portland. I would walk the streets of Japan and in Tokyo trying to find a location for the Ace Hotel in Tokyo. We were not successful. Kengokuma sends me a note and says, have you ever thought of Kyoto? That's how this first idea of Kyoto and ACE came about. So this is ACE in Kyoto. Later, Alex's dream was to collaborate with this gentleman, one of my real heroes. This is Ryuichi Sakamoto, the giant of music, one of the great pianists in the world. And Alex's celebration at the ACE But to commemorate his memory and the 20th anniversary of the Ace, we brought Mr. Sakamoto to play on the stage of the Ace Hotel in Los Angeles. So here's the connection again. Portland, Ace Hotel, Sakamoto, and further. And it keeps going. So in that book about collaboration, there was a page here called The Golden Rules of Artist Collaborations. I'm not going to go through these, but from that, I put together these thoughts. Because collaborations is one thing, but how do we work as partners is important. So I'm going to talk about examples of the work that we've done based on respect. And when we say respect, of course, there's respect for the consumer, but respect for the intelligence of the consumer. So much today in marketing, what's under threat is that the art and science of marketing is being replaced by only the science of marketing. The human intuition, the human ideas, the heart is being phased out. And that is a dangerous trend that we're seeing. So in 1998, I opened Wieden+Kennedy in Tokyo, and I was adamant on finding a client that was Japanese. I found it disturbing that American agencies, creative agencies, really didn't have an interest in having Japanese clients. And I thought that was really rude. How am I going to be a citizen of your city and a citizen of your culture if I'm not contributing back to your culture? So I looked for a client. But no one knew who Wieden was. We were not famous. We were famous everywhere, but we were nothing in Tokyo. So I found this little company called UNIQLO in Yamaguchi Prefecture, 2 hours south of Tokyo by plane, with no stores in Tokyo in 1998, 1999. So that was the challenge. UNIQLO was entering the Tokyo market, but it didn't have a brand image of high quality at the time. So the question was, can we express our uniqueness? Speaking for my client, speaking for UNIQLO, can we express our uniqueness as an apparel brand through intelligence? Through intelligence. This should play, we'll see.
僕がギターを始めたわけは、手軽さ、気軽さ、どこでも持っていける、こいつがあったら、何でもできる。
Remember that. So, what do I mean by intelligence? Was he puffing up the fleece? Was he saying this keeps me 20% warmer? Did he say it's 14% cheaper? Did he say it was lighter? No. The consumer is smart. So there's a lot of depth in here, even though I didn't have to spell it out. Trust the intelligence of the consumer. I'm not sure the video. Do I have to do double click on the video? There should be one more. Let's see what happens here. So this was the launch of e-commerce. Fleece became the #1 hit for the country, and we made 50 exclusive colors for the launch of e-commerce. Built this studio just to showcase, and there were no words. I didn't need words in this commercial. Number 2, celebrate and first of all, avoid elitism and celebrate everyone. And when I say avoid elitism, I'm surrounded by my family, my sons in the world of contemporary art and academia. Well, there's nothing but elitism there. I'm choking in it. You know, I can barely keep my neck above the waterline there. This is the power of what we're trying to create. Celebration of everyone. Everyone is important. Everyone deserves respect. So, back to '98. This was the first work that we did in Tokyo. Back to the same campaign. So the challenge was to communicate the brand's ethos of equality. One of the things I noticed when I visited the headquarters and the way I watched how people worked was a sense of equality in the office, the sense of respect that everyone had for each other. So the challenge here, one of the founding principles was made for all. How do we express this principle that we're for everyone intelligently? I'll play the next one, so I'll make the comments after that.
20歳の時に3歳の子供と2つ年上の女房とで北海道から来ました。昔は俺も悪かったけれども、今じゃ日曜日のたびに動物園行ってます。俺も変わったよな。いつか紋別へ帰るぞ。
So did I have a campaign called We Are Democratic? Did we have a campaign called We Are Made for All, We Are for You, You Are for Me, and so forth? No. We demonstrated by showing in our media buy a complete respect for a 14-year-old girl in Harajuku with a construction worker, with a professor, with a guitar player. We just demonstrated. I don't have to say it. Just do it and show it. And this campaign became very famous because it also broke through the clutter of most commercial television in Japan at that time. It was quiet, if you notice, locked off camera, no movement with the camera, no rough cuts, no big cuts, no music, nothing. Just tell me the story and let me interpret it myself. Respect the intelligence of the people, number one. The other thing about this was that the bean counters, the media smart people would say, John, if you use 15-second spots, you can do 2 of them instead of 1. I go, why would that be better? Well, you get 2 spots instead of 1. You could run that spot twice instead of these 30-second spots. So imagine someone who says something to you and he repeats it to you or she repeats it to you right away. How smart is that person? But the bean counters would say 2 15s are better than 30. No, a 30 is my sense of respect to everyone, everyday people, giving them television to tell their own story. Respect their story. Number 3, inspire. Rational messages are never enough. Inspire through the power of creativity. This is in 2000. Nike came to Japan to introduce one of the revolutionary shoes that really changed the whole idea of sneakers, which was a low-profile, easy-to-wear shoe that was not necessarily associated with a particular sport. So the challenge was to introduce a breakthrough sneaker concept first in Japan. So how do we celebrate a new innovation that is appealing universally between men, women, between people who loved all kinds of physical activity, not just a particular sport? And what was happening in the zeitgeist? The zeitgeist was that there's a new independent spirit with young, interesting people. So what we did here was, this is a kind of a capsule of many seasons of Presto work. We combined all the interesting people who were the independents. Independent DJs, independent music maker, independent animators, independent designers, independent fashion designers, and independent industrial designers, combining them all to make something interesting to talk about, to express the product benefits of a Presto shoe. So we ran many commercials. I won't take time to show, but here's one 30-second spot, and it's to inspire people to move. So that television commercial then is linked to the digital, into the internet, and all these different storytelling methods are put in place. The last example, I'm going to show you something that just happened a few weeks ago, and it relates to today. It's called Peace for All. The challenge was to create, this is for UNIQLO again, to create an opportunity for the public, the general public, for everyone to support peace. So the question is, how do we inspire great creators, people who are not normally thought of as designers or artists, but they're still creators, to help raise money so that we can put money into those organizations around the world to help people in need during this time where everyone is struggling to find peace. So, we're very famous for our T-shirts, and the T-shirts have been for decades have been the platform, the blank canvas for important things to be said. So here we have Pritzker Prize-winning architect Tadao Ando with his T-shirt, "The Earth is One." And I'm not going to take you through all of these, and then that's Murakami, the great literary giant, doing his T-shirt. On the bottom, Kashiwa Sato, one of the giants in graphic design, and to the bottom right, Nobel Peace Prize winner in medicine, creating his T-shirt, and fashion designer Inez on the upper corner. So this project called Peace for All is all monies donated towards the UN, and we're raising money as we speak every day, and we're about to go to phase 2. So, and end this little presentation, the question is, how can we, all of us in this room, on the eve of this new institute, Stephen, how can we together make the greatest impact? Collaborate. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, John. So I want to take it from that last point, that collaboration, and talking about the greatest impact to the society. And could you start, John, by talking a little bit about, from your experience of across the multiple decades and across the world, the idea of the trends that you're seeing? And trends generally imply continuity. But there's also these disruptions. We're seeing disequilibriums and discontinuity of trends. What are some of the things that we should be paying attention to as it relates to mega trends and then game changers?
Well, I think obviously I'm in the business of watching and monitoring and being a part of that, but I also think the idea of trends is very dangerous, first of all. There's not always quality in trends. There's not always substance in trends, right? So that's what we're seeking. So what's interesting is that if it's related to anything, I would say one of the great dangers that management has around the world, and I get to work with some interesting management teams, is how they lose perspective of change and how they lose sight of that the world is changing. So if you want to call that watching trends, you can. It's about watching the zeitgeist and participating, how siloed they become, and they become isolated in their little ivory towers. This is older people and young people too. Isolated in the ivory towers and lose sight of how culture is changing around them. And that's why certain brands, certain great apparel brands from the 80s are no longer relevant. That's why certain brands in automobiles are no longer relevant. How did that happen? It didn't happen overnight because people lost sight of change because they were isolated in their little silos.
What are some of the practical examples as it relates to the role of culture and arts?
And how to prevent that from happening?
Yep.
Well, it's interesting, probably on the surface, Darren and I, probably you wouldn't, who's not here right now, you wouldn't probably pick two people more different, size and look and everything, right? But I so connected with him because it's about people. And this is something they don't understand. I'm still talking about this. Every office that I opened, when I opened Wieden Kennedy Tokyo, and we were nothing. No one cared who we were. They didn't know. I said to Dan Wieden, we will become the best connected office in this city. Connected socially, connected culturally. We will know the best business people, the best creative people, and not search on the internet, but to know them and to help them and to be a part of their community. So what Darren said was really important. The way he invites people to the farm and gives that experience, that is so powerful. And to me, That is making that connection. My new office that I opened for UNIQLO in New York is all about that.
You both touched on technology, and I think that there's lots of romance in terms of what technology can do in terms of communication, how it can break barriers, but you're also talking about challenges right now. Ted, do you mind talking a little bit about the breakthroughs and how do you see that, bringing it into the smart home and what it can do for us, and potentially challenges? What if there is 5 of us inside of the home and we all have different preferences? What does the smart technology do then?
So I think a key word is to do the right thing, and then integrity, and something good, and do the right thing. Technology is just a tool, not the objective, of course. That's the reason why I said I don't want to put the panel and iPad on the wall. So this looks like a very objective. Hey, here's a technology that will be a selling point. You can pay for this. No. We should look at the people, and then what is the happiness, what the peace of mind, very carefully. And then if you have a good insight of each people, because people's demand and then happiness, it's more like a universal. So we look at not American people, not a Japanese people, not the races, of course, not the gender. So what is the most universal language, universal experience we can create? That's connected to the integrity and sustainability. Do the right thing. So technology is just a piece of the puzzle. And then we utilize the technology to make the people happy. So that's how I approach to the smart home technology. iPad on the wall, and then using Alexa, maybe, but just a part of it.
John, you want to expand on that?
Well, we should all read After Steve, the book on what's happened to Apple. And in it, Steve Jobs on his deathbed is talking to Tim Cook, and Tim Cook says to him, will I be always asking the question, what would Steve do? What would Steve do? He said, don't ask that question. He said, do the right thing. Just do the right thing.
One of the right things to do, and thanks to Portland Japanese Garden today, is bringing us all together. So what are some of the common threads that you see as the recommendations going forward, both short-term and long-term, that we can do as it relates to connections between Oregon, Japan, 2 cultures? And is it really unique to Japan and Oregon? Or do you see the universal elements that can apply to other relationships?
Well, it's totally off the topic, but what about intuitive thoughts of myself is that one of the universal language between Oregon and Japan in general is very nice food. Yesterday we have a great dinner for the very close, thanks Aki and all the people organize it. But when I was a child, I can't believe that American people eat octopus and uni and sea urchin, and what the hell can happen? But now they enjoy such a nice Japanese food. And then additionally, Oregon, not just New York, not Los Angeles, Oregon added their own local flavor and then local understanding and translation to the local culture. So that fusion is a great addition, not just 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 equal maybe something different, not the numbers, but such a uniqueness, keep Portland weird. We love it, we respect it. So such a unique culture is well received by Japanese people. Sorry, totally off the topic, but I just want to say
great.
that, my impression.
Yeah. Well, native people knew it really well because that's one of the first things that they did. They invited you for the meal and for the gatherings because there was ever conversations to be had. So, John?
Well, there's so much power here in Portland, Oregon, that sometimes, depending on what silo you work in and live in, you lose sight of that power. And the great power is the subculture. I know we all laugh at the bumper sticker, keep Portland weird and all of that, but there's some important truth to that. Where management lose sight of power and influence and trend and all of that, and culture, is the power of youth. Young people are driving new ideas and innovation. And we are so blind to that so often. So blind. We're so used to our own ways, like the builders that you're talking about and so forth.
So to conclude is, based on your personal journeys, and you are forever rebel, what would be some of the recommendations that you have for global leaders, especially as it relates to the youth and young generations, and how to advance forward and carry this idea of the continuity and connectedness?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I would say that, it's talk to myself as well. Getting out from the comfort zone. Speaking Japanese, eating Japanese food is very comfortable for me, of course. But, like today, getting out from my comfort zone and talking with the different, great people, not only for Jay, but a lot of people in this room, makes me very excited. And I can see a lot of different world and different, ideas. So exploring different world out of my comfort zone makes me more excited. And then also I can inspire other people. And then I can find another contribution point to other people and society people. That is very important. So inspiration, back to your keyword, collaboration. So that need to be happened by leaders. I'm lucky because I was born raised in a very, very small town. It's the smallest population in prefecture called in Tottori. I never expected my, other kids live in the United States, but this could happen because I'm following my, instinct, whatever idea I can get and excited. And then eventually I found myself living in the United States and even, eventually in Portland right here today. So that's, activities, changing the world, changing yourself. So I would say that like that.
Great.
I'd say inspiration starts with conversations, and that's what the Institute is going to be doing, that kind of conversation. Traveling, now that COVID is hopefully not quite behind us yet, but traveling is the most humbling act that we can make because it takes you to places and you realize, oh my God, I don't know anything. Oh my God, I had no idea about this culture, about this food, this language. It's the most humbling experience. It teaches you how much you have to learn yet. So if we can travel, I know we're the lucky ones if we can. That's always helpful, I think.
Well, before we go traveling, let's at least travel throughout the room and see if there's any, if there are any additional thoughts or questions that we would like to explore from audience.
I'm curious, this is for Takeshi-san. Why are these Japanese companies wanting to give you all this investment to build in Portland, Oregon? I'm just curious where that comes from. Is it that they're hoping you're developing something that you'll bring back to Japan? Is it a connection with the U.S.? Is it a connection to Oregon? I'm just curious, with all of that list of Japanese companies, and it's not even in their own place. Right.
I think the best answer to your question is because he has a Japanese garden. That's I'm serious, but another perspective is that maybe we feel some sympathy in Portland culture because so many nice food and then nice beer and wine and independent stores and then we have a culture in Japan to respect independent and then very unique things because we have a lot of interior store in Japan because we love it, some small stuff in the goods and something like that. But we can find very interesting here in Portland. I recommend my friend and people, or even not a business for the pleasure, coming to Portland, enjoy it. I'm, take them to a lot of different places in Portland, but most of them fall in love in Portland for some reason. I don't know, but we have a good fit anyway, culturally, mentally.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions we have?
Well, I would ask Ted about this question. Now, as I grew up in Japan, and I've lived here in Portland over 35 years, and I really have not seen as many creative people coming out of Japanese education system. Particularly, Tottori is just not in the central, and it's very. I would assume it's much more conservative, and the education system is not really encouraging. Creativity. Much more people are more afraid of being black sheep. And kind of teacher said, do you have a question? That means, don't you ever ask me a question. You just memorize what I told you. That's pretty much it. Versus in Portland, as John said, but this is much more like, be entrepreneurial and do something different and just stand out in a different way. It's just very opposite. So it's really, amazing to see somebody like you, Ted, who grew up in that system and still be, as creative as you can be. And tell me, what made you this different? That's very, very,
May I call to mom? Well, yeah, that's a very interesting question. The word I raised at my presentation at the end, seriously, was the best way to predict future, to invent it. That representing my life. When I grew up born and grown up in Tottori, my life is that, my grandfather seriously told me when I graduated school, hey, Takeshi, you should go to the bank, and then you can marry with someone. You can build your own home. That's your life, It's not my life, of course. I'm sorry, but I respect my family and parents, of course, but I never follow what they told me. Because my life is not on their hand. My life has to be created by myself. And then, of course, based on my assumption, given the situation, environment in Tottori, I should be like that way. But I don't want to do that. So then I try to design my life by myself. And then I try to find a way to follow my hope and follow my direction, follow my wish. Then I come to here. Yeah, so that's only the way I can explain to myself. It's very difficult to explain myself though. But another one is that I can speak English. That's the reason why. Language expands your world a lot. I first came to the United States aged at 32 years old. I never lived in any foreign countries, and then I never studied abroad. But I have to survive at the company. So then my boss, American people, a native speaker, of course, he told me, hey, Ted, you should go to the Biarritz, an English, conversation school. And then you need to improve your English. And then I went there every Wednesday and then Friday from 8:30 to 12 p.m. For 6 months. And then try to improve my pronunciation, listening capability, whatever I can do to improve my English capability. So then that built myself how to survive here. So language is very important, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both, and thanks for the audience for participating. This has been a great session, and look forward to final comments from Steve.
Thank you.
So thank you to everyone for your participation today. This has been a fantastic event for us and a first of a kind. And I think we are going to use this event, whether or not we continue to partner with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, to launch at least an annual conversation around these shared ideals that we talked about today in terms of environmental sustainability and creative class and the power of culture, art, and nature. So this is the beginning of a conversation and a dialogue. Thank you to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Thank you, Consul General Shiga, for being here, and to the Senator and to the Governor who have had to run out. I want to thank Aki Nakanishi and my staff here at the Portland Japanese Garden and the Japan Institute for the incredible work and planning, which seemed to get replanned and replanned and replanned through the pandemic. And to our wonderful moderators and panelists here as well today. I want to just leave with a few parting thoughts as I reflect on what I heard today. And it was a vast array of information across a number of different fields. And we might think to ourselves, well, how does this all tie together, right? And you have to take a step back and think about it. Whether it's clean energy or food security, technology or design, integrated living spaces as we learn how to be with nature, and what feeds our soul, the importance of all of this, and people to people, and the collaborations that we talked about and how important that is, the power of our creative community to collaborate with clean energy and food security and all of those things. And for me, as I step back and I think about, well, what does this have to do with each other, and how is this important in our world and our lives? And I think it all brings peace, in that all of this is about elevating the human condition. Because when you can't clothe your child, when you can't feed someone, when you don't have a job to support someone, when your planet is on fire, when your crops are burning, that creates less than a harmonic world, both at a micro level and a macro level. And so I think that's the lesson we take away from today was, yes, these were big items and big topics across a vast array, but it really all comes back to elevating the human condition. And in elevating the human condition, only then can we find peace as a planet. Thank you all very much for being here today, and we look forward to cocktails. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.